Right, it is 7 o'clock and it looks like we have a full quorum. So why don't we go ahead and call this January 26th Albany Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to order. With that, can we please have roll call, staff?
Yes. Commissioner McLeod.
Here.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Moman.
Here.
Commissioner Pilch.
Present.
And Chair Waddy.
Here. Thank you. Item 3 on our agenda, ex parte communications. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose this evening?
No, none.
All right. Seeing none.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner Donaldson, was that one?
Yeah. I actually had a couple of chats with neighbors when I was doing a field visit at the project on Evelyn, but didn't really talk about the project. Okay.
Great. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion. Approval of the consent calendar means that the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission, and there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the commission or a member of the public requests to remove any of these items from the consent calendar. So this evening, we have 2 items on our consent calendar. First up, we have item 4-1. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from January 12th. And item 4-2, Planning Application 22-004. This is a design review for a new second story dormer expansion at 1082 Tevlin Street. First up, do any commissioners wish to pull either of these items off consent? Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, I'd like to pull the minutes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Other than the minutes, does anyone have any other comments? All right. Seeing none, why don't we go ahead and open it up for public comment, see if the other item is going to be pulled off, and then we'll turn it back. So members of the public, now is your opportunity to speak. If you have any concerns about either of the items on the consent calendar and wish either of them to be pulled off, please go ahead and raise your hand now. Chris, do we have any members of the public in the queue for public comment on the consent calendar?
No, I'm not seeing any.
Okay, then with that, we'll go ahead and close the public comment on the consent calendar. Commissioner Donaldson, do you want to just have a quick discussion on the meeting minutes and then maybe we can still move those 2 items together? Or is it a larger discussion?
You know, I think we better, maybe I'll move approval of the rest of the consent calendar at this point. Mm-hmm.
Sure thing. Go ahead.
Okay.
So is that a motion?
That's a motion, yes.
All right.
Second.
Okay, that's great. And so there is a motion on the floor to approve planning application 22-004, design review for dormers at 1082 Tevlin. So then on that motion, Commissioner McLeod.
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Moman.
Yeah, I was not present in the last meeting, so I will not vote on the minutes.
This is just for the Tevlin Street project right now. We're pulling.
Nowadays.
Okay, great. Commissioner Pilch.
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I vote yes as well. So the Tevlin Street project has been approved, I believe, and staff correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there are story poles that are required up for that one. Not for the dormers. Okay. Then that item is approved, but please do still adhere to the 14-day appeal period on that one. And with that, we'll go ahead and bring it back to item 4-1, which is the meeting minutes. Commissioner Donaldson, why don't you go ahead and
yeah, thank you. On page 5, when we were discussing the 1023 Evelyn project, there was a motion to approve, and it looked like it passed. And then after that, there was a substitute motion to approve, and it looked like it passed. And one of them had a suggestion of the garage being not more than 14 feet wide, and the other one had it narrowed to 12 feet wide. I guess my question is this clear what we did actually, and was it intended, or is it true that the substitute motion overrides the first motion? It appears we did vote on the first motion and it passed. So I remember it being a little bit confusing at the time. I think I was in favor of the 14 feet. Commissioner McLeod said, let's narrow it to 12 feet. And everyone seemed to agree on that with some other conditions. So I'm confused about what we did and what staff has communicated to the applicant as well.
I'll just chime in really quick. When I sent the notice of action, the conditions of approval read that the garage door should be no more than 12 feet wide. and that if there was objection to that, we would bring the project back to the commission for review.
Okay.
I don't think we could have voted on the first motion because there was a substitute motion which we voted on. So
That's
perhaps
right. I don't recall. Mhm.
Yeah, perhaps the recording of the vote is there as an error.
Yeah, maybe why don't we do that? Maybe we should ask that the minutes be revised to delete that recording of the vote. And I don't remember specifically the details. I'm comfortable enough with the substitute motion myself, and I made the first motion, I think. Yes. Yeah. So would that be all right? Okay. I see. Yeah. All right. With that, then I'll move approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 12th with the modification that we delete the voting record on the first motion on 1023 Evelyn, found on page 5.
I can second that.
Okay, great. Then on that motion, Commissioner McLeod,
I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Momin.
Yes.
Oh, and you were recused from that meeting, so no vote from you recusal. Commissioner Pilch,
Yes.
Commissioner Donaldson,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Obviously, I was recused from that specific item, but on the rest of the minutes, I vote yes. So that motion passes 4 with 1 recusal from the meeting minutes. So thank you, everyone, on that. Moving right along here, item 5 on our agenda, announcements and communications. We have one item, 5-1 here, an announcement on the League of California Cities Planning Commission Academy. Jeff, did you have an announcement on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that commissioners were aware of this. I sent you an email. The League of California Cities sponsors these planning commissioner academies from time to time, and there's a session coming up in March in San Ramon. So it's not always in Northern California in the Bay Area. If commissioners are interested in attending, please let me know, and we can arrange for your registration. I also would like to know that there will be it was in the email that I sent to the commission, letting you know about this planning commission agenda. There's also going to be a Alameda County workshop for decision makers on housing elements, and it's being put on by one of the consultants that are helping Alameda County cities with our housing element process. In my email to the commissioners, I put a date of, I believe, March 17th. That date has changed, and now the date is Friday, March 25th. I'll send another email tomorrow. This just came in an hour or so ago. I'll send another email tomorrow, but I just wanted to verbally make that note that date has moved around a little bit. Okay.
Great. Thank you on that. Moving right along here, we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is public comment. This is general public comment for members of the public who wish to address the commission on an item that is not otherwise on this evening's agenda. So if you have public comment relating to one of the agendized items, please hold your public comment until we call those matters. But this is for other topics not otherwise agendized. So if you would like to address the commission, now is your opportunity to raise your hand. Yes, and Commissioner Pilch, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, before we start on that, I just wanted to make a note about the announcements from Jeff, in that I attended one of those academies in previous years. I was in person in, not Glendale, but one of those Southern California cities. Anyway, it was very worthwhile, and I recommend it highly. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, so moving back to public comment here, please go ahead and raise your hand. And it looks like we have at least 1 or 2 people in the queue. So Chris, could you please go ahead and call the first speaker?
Yes, one moment. First speaker is Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Hi, good evening, planning and zoning. I'm kind of caught in a catch-22. I'm not sure what to do with regarding certain city streets. Planning and zoning, this is more private, personal property. I just have a couple issues with public property. Just the safety in the plaza over there in Sprouts. There's no 4-way stop right there at 10th and Monroe. But anyway, it's really dangerous right there. Sorry, I got off sidetrack there. Let me stick to the topic. I'm just wondering, planning and zoning, where in Albany is zoned for, let's say a hotel or a homeless shelter? Because I'm thinking, where could a homeless shelter pop up? Where can a hotel or a motel pop up in Albany? There is not one within the city limits. So Albany has difficulty housing people in, emergency hotels. We got to be outsourced to other cities. So I'm just wondering, what are some of the barriers in place that or maybe stopping a homeless shelter or a motel or a hotel to exist in Albany? So those are just a couple questions for that. And regarding the homeless shelter, also a warming shelter, just something, I'll go public with this. I still have my wife's office on Solano, and I'm still leasing it. And I have hopes to turn that into something great and useful for the city, whether it be a homeless shelter, a SEJC resource center, something. But I plan to keep that office and do something with it. A miniature food bank, food rescue, maybe even just a free COVID test site, on Solano. But I'm going to do something big with that office. I want to do it right, and I want to do it with permission, but I want to do something good for the city, to offer services. Maybe eventually it could be the Albany Food and Housing office. If we get an Albany Food and Housing someday. So I don't know. Those are my questions. How do we go about putting up a homeless shelter, a warming shelter, and some technicalities? Thanks.
Okay, next speaker, Shirley. Shirley, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I own and I'm talking about 1145 Evelyn Avenue. Is this the time to talk about it?
No, it's not. We'll call that item after general public comment.
Okay. Thank you, dear. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay. That's enough. Right.
I'm not seeing any other speakers with their hands up.
Okay, great. This is the last call for, again, general public comment on items that are not otherwise listed elsewhere on today's agenda. All right, going once, going twice. We'll go ahead and close general public comment and move back to the regular agenda. Sorry, hang on. It's hard to switch screens here. So general public comment is closed, and that takes us to item 7 on our agenda, which is possible action items. This evening, we have 3 items on our agenda. So calling the first one right now, we have item 7-1. This is planning application 21-080. It's a design review and parking exception for a garage conversion and second story addition at 1145 Evelyn Avenue. And again, just because I know we have a lot of speakers that are, don't know if they're for both this item or the following, but just to sort of set the tone for this evening. So we will have a presentation from staff, and maybe for efficiency's sake, we will then open it up for a presentation from the applicant. The Planning Commission will then ask questions of either the applicant or of staff. We will then open it up for public comment on this item. And when public comment is closed, the commissioners will then deliberate, discuss, and potentially take an action on this item this evening. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to staff for a presentation on this item.
Great. One moment. Let me just share my screen. Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everyone. Once again, this is planning application 21080, design review and parking exception for garage conversion and a second story addition at 1145 Evelyn. Some background on the property. The subject property is a 6,141 square foot lot with a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 1,343 square foot home built in 1952. The subject property is located in the R1 zoning district with the watercourse overlay. Cordonices Creek runs through the southern portion of the subject parcel. City records show minor work done to the property in the past. In recent years, the Commission has approved several projects located in the watercourse overlay. A few of these projects include 1146 Evelyn, which was design review, conditional use permit, and a parking exception for a 2-level addition, along with an attached second-story ADU. Another one was 1198 Curtis, which was also design review and a variance actually for a new 2-story home. So that was a completely new home on an empty lot. And then also 404 Talbot, which you saw at the previous Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, which was a design review and parking reduction for a 2-level addition. Here's a street view of the property as it sits today. Project requests. The applicant is seeking design review for a garage conversion and a 2nd-story addition to accommodate a new master suite. They're also seeking a parking exception approval to relocate 2 off-street parking spaces in the front yard as a result of the proposed garage conversion. Altogether, the project scope would result in a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2,172 square foot home with a maximum height of 22 feet and 3 inches. Here's an existing elevation of the front facade. And here's the 3D rendering of the front of the building provided by the architect. And here's also a 3D rendering of the existing home from the creek side looking at the building. And here's the proposed front elevation for the home. The proposed front view 3D rendering. The proposed side view rendering also from the creek looking at the building. As mentioned before, the project is in the watercourse overlay and pursuant to section 2024-030G1 of the Albany Municipal Code, structures shall not be located closer than 3 feet from the top of natural creek bank when located in the watercourse overlay. And here's just a snapshot of the overlay regulations. This was also included in the staff report. And here's also the proposed site plan. You'll see the hash line above the deck here denotes the creek setback area. And this is the 2nd-story addition that's proposed. Additionally, the architect provided some photos of the creek. As you'll see, there's a pretty steep drop off into the creek as you approach it. So a couple more photos here. And here's a photo looking at the subject property and its deck, and along with the creek at the bottom of the photo. Parking exception. There are 2 off-street parking spaces in the attached garage located at the front of the home. The project scope, as I mentioned, involves converting a portion of the garage into additional living space for the home. The applicant is therefore seeking a parking exception to relocate parking to the front yard to accommodate the garage conversion. The proposed driveway dimensions are 17 feet wide by 18 feet in length. And that would accommodate side-by-side parking, which is compliant pursuant to section 2028-040 of the Albany Municipal Code. And should the commission approve the parking exception, it would result in the same number of parking spaces that it currently has too, but it would be located in the front yard of the property. And then here's just a snapshot of the proposed site plan. You'll see 2 parking spaces. The curb cuts proposed to remain the same at 17 feet wide, and it would be located in the front yard setback area. Staff has received 1 formal correspondence voicing concerns with the proposed building height, construction noise, and concerns relating to possible effects to the neighboring houses, foundation, and walls. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15303. And recommendation. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions of approval. Just notably, you will see that we included special watercourse overlay conditions of approval. They were at the top of the conditions of approval as an attachment in the staff report. And with that, if there's any questions, staff is happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Why don't we first, before we open it for questions, open it up for the project applicant to give their presentation, and then we'll turn it back for any questions.
Okay, let's see. So I believe the property owner is available to speak. We'll go ahead and let him speak. Steve, you can go ahead and speak.
Great, thank you. And thanks for all the work that the city staff has done and really just the welcome environment that we've found in Albany. My name is Steve Tabakman, and we're the new property owners with my wife, Sharon Delente, at 1145 Albany. We're moved here in August from Detroit, Michigan. We're both public interest lawyers, work on social justice issues. She works on democracy issues and voting rights. I work on immigration and economic development. We moved to Albany because it's a lovely community. We have 2 children. Our oldest, Nia, is at the middle school in 7th grade, and our youngest, Adiv, is at Cornell in the 3rd grade, and have really loved the community and are grateful to be here. Every interaction we've had so far with the city, we've, from the day that we purchased the house, the staff has just been really inviting and warm, and I really want to thank them for their professionalism and their promptness. And so when we, bought this house, it hasn't received a lot of work. It's kind of been deteriorated a little bit, and we're eager to improve the property and also improve the lot. We are a family of 4 right now. We're in 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and so it's a little bit small. We're happy to, work with the community, work with the city, the planning commission, our neighbors, to make sure that the impact of the project is, minimal, and that it's seen as an improvement into the community and an investment in this community and improving the lot and the community. We're excited about a number of environmental improvements we hope to make, bringing in solar panels, using heat pumps, all kinds of improvements like that we're discussing with our architect. So we certainly can answer any questions. The architect is knowledgeable and licensed here in the region and has practiced in the Bay Area, and our design had taken great pains to follow all the rules related to the creek, related to the water district, related to the parking spots. And so hopefully everything we've done so far is within the codes that we're doing, and we're eager for the discussion and any questions you have.
Great. Thank you, Steve. With that, commissioners, are there any questions either of staff or of the project applicant? Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, I do have a question. I don't know if it could be answered right now. I was hoping maybe an architect or engineer would be available. My question really is simply, does anyone know what the projected elevation is of the 100-year flood? The firm map, it doesn't show that. The survey shows the elevations of the building and of the creek. It looks like the base floor inside the house is about 72 feet above sea level. But the firm map shows flooding going all the way through the lot and beyond, as best I can tell, looking at it. And I really would like to know what the top elevation would be, what the elevation would be of a 100-year flood. And in this case, the firm map doesn't show it. So that's a concern for me. I think it's an important piece of information that's missing. And I was hoping that perhaps the applicant or the applicant's architect or engineer might be able to fill us in on that. Thank you. That's it. That's my question.
Chair Waddy, I could attempt to respond to that. Unfortunately, I don't have that answer. Commissioner Donaldson, you're correct. The firm map does not accurately represent where water will actually go in a 100-year flood scenario. To my knowledge, those kinds of hydrological studies have not been done of Quadanesi's Creek. So, it's not a simple task. It would really involve studying the entire watershed of Quadanesi's Creek in order to get an accurate assessment of that. So unfortunately, we don't have that answer, and it wouldn't be readily available to any of us at this point in time.
All right, Commissioner Moman, put your hand up next.
I have first question to the staff. I understand that a portion of the house is already encroaching in the creek bank setback, and also a portion of the deck. I want to know if another deck can be permitted to encroach in the setback, and if a deck is considered a structure or a landscape feature.
Yeah, good question. So the deck is not considered, is not factored into the creek setback area because it's not part of the primary house as far as the built structure is concerned. It doesn't count towards FAR. Similarly to other zoning districts, we do allow other architectural features like this to encroach into setback areas, such as decks and chimneys and such. So this has not been factored into that.
Right. So I would like to ask the owner, have they thought about how would they structurally upgrade and expand the deck foundation without damaging the creek bank, and how the soil condition will be restored after excavation and construction, and what precautions would they be taking to prevent any water pollution during construction, or any debris falling in the creek?
I believe this is the architect I can allow to speak. Mauricio, is this you? He's calling in, one moment. Mauricio? Maybe, I believe, Sharon, are you Mauricio's colleague?
I am the homeowner with my, so I think, Christopher, are you able to get Mauricio, the architect? He's joining.
Yeah, we're working on that. It's not working right now. Hold on.
So, he was clearly, he'd been communicating with Christopher before this about making sure that he had the appropriate information, and he's indicating to us all that he's having trouble joining. I think that as the plans and the proposed project indicated, there was two things I think that can be most responsive to the commissioner's question. Number one, I think you can see perhaps from some of the photos that this house has an extraordinarily modern foundation. It has, I think actually in some of the pictures you're able to see, it has a very significant foundation for its time and when it was built. And so the discussion so far with the engineers, right, who are the ones who have to, tell you exactly what is required, is that foundation will provide significant portion of what's required and very minimal additional, I'm not going to use the exact proper name, but right, very minimal additional support will be required for a second floor because the existing foundation was so, in the term I've heard, is over-engineered for the house at the time. Christopher, I'm going to answer.
Actually directed toward the decks, actually, not the.
Hello? Oh, sorry. Okay.
Hello, it's Mauricio.
Oh.
We have the project architect on the phone and available.
I deeply apologize for the technical glitch. I'm here to answer any questions. So if I'm following this correctly, I think the question is regarding the proximity of, there's a couple of things happening right now with the house. The existing house was already constructed within the 20 feet creek setback. And there's an existing deck that overhangs over the hillside. Both exactly what the homeowner has just shared. I mean, the foundation was built in the 60s. It's a grade beam foundation with the drill piers. We have just received the geotechnical report, and we'll be keeping the foundation in place primarily and using very disruptive methods of underpinning the foundation, probably with driven micropiles. Everything in the best attempts we can do mitigate any potential further erosion or anything detrimental to the creek. Obviously, during construction, we'll have all kinds of protective barriers and measures and silt fences and things like that that will, that will be part of the waste management portion of the project. They'll protect the creek during construction. But on the long run, I think we're keeping mostly of the house footprint as it is, including the deck overhang, basically replace the existing posts at the same location with the same kind of a pier foundation. And there's not going to be any further disruption to the creek hillside. I hope that that suffices, or if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Great. Then moving on, Commissioner McLeod, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi, thank you. Well, I guess I answered one of my questions, which was how much of the existing foundation would be replaced. And it sounds like not replaced, but augmented in some places for the second story. I guess my other question, and this is also for staff, Christopher, if you could show at some point the diagram of the natural creek bank definition, because and this kind of goes back to my problem with the ambiguity of our ordinance about the top of the natural creek bank. And to me, it looks like the top of the natural creek bank is much closer to the house, which, if that's the case, then it essentially puts the whole lot in that setback from the natural creek bank. So, and the house is there. So, I don't want to make too much in the way of comments right now, but, I think we need to be much clearer about it. It's not from the edge of the water or the edge of the lower bank. It's the top bank. And that, to me, looks like much higher on the slope than where the architect has drawn it. A lot of cities, most cities just say center line of creek. And I think that would be a much more easily definable ordinance, but that's not our ordinance. So, I think we should actually change it. But until we do, this is what we're dealing with. And the top of the bank, to me, looks like much higher up on the slope than where it's drawn in the plans. So I'd like some clarification of that. And then that's basically my question, I guess. And I'm remembering one project where they were required to build it. Was it 3 feet above the floodplain? That was one where they were high enough. And I think this finished floor is high enough above it's high enough above the flat grade of the lot. So I'm not really concerned about that as 3 feet above that, but I don't know what the floodplain is, and maybe we'll never know exactly. But anyway, my biggest concern is where the top of the natural creek bank is and where the 20-foot setback starts for discussion. So thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions before we go ahead and open this up for public comment? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for public comment then. So for members of the public, now is your opportunity to get in the queue. Please go ahead and raise your hand, and Chris will go ahead and call each of you as your turn comes up. We'll each have 3 minutes to speak. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. The first speaker up is Jeremiah. Jeremiah, you have 3 minutes starting now.
Thanks. Well, as we all know, water is Mother Nature's eraser. Turn down my radio. And I was just wondering if there's such a term called the, rate of decomposition, decay, rate of erosion. There we go. Rate of erosion. In 100 years, is some of that dirt gonna wash away because of the rain and the creek? Is the creek gonna widen? I'm just wondering if there's a rate of erosion. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but hopefully you get the idea. So basically my point is, if there's such thing as a rate of erosion and the creek washes away and that line you were just talking about above the floodplain, is it possible to build some sort of retaining wall, out of stone and rebar connected to the foundation in some sort of setback area to where the rate of erosion wouldn't start deteriorating something? So that's just my question. And obviously my next point would be the any sort of litter or trash or contaminants going in the water.
Okay.
Christopher, would you like me to answer? It's Mauricio here, the architect.
We're taking public comment right now. So we'll wait, Mauricio.
Okay.
Next speaker, Julie Durkee. You have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Thank you. And thank you for this forum tonight. I really appreciate it. I am a neighbor of the project, and I'm actually here to just support it. I think that it's a small house for a family, and they're improving their way of life. I don't think it's going to take that long to do the project once they actually get in and do it. And it's also just going to create more value for the neighborhood and for their quality of life. So, I think, we will all figure out what's going on with the creek and, how to safeguard the creek, but also for them to be able to add on to their home, at the same time. So I'm just here in support of it. That's all.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other speakers in the queue.
All right, great. This is last call. If there are any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item, now is your opportunity to speak. And does not look like there are any new speakers. I think that's just the project applicant. So with that, we'll go ahead and close public comment and turn it back to the commission for deliberations. Any commissioner want to kick things off here?
Well, it sounded like the project applicant wanted to respond a little bit.
Oh, sure. We can go ahead and do that. So Mauricio, if you'd like to go ahead and respond to the public comment and questions.
Sure. No, I think actually I appreciate. Thank you, Jeremiah. I think your concern is actually my concern also. A creek, and we have looked in detail. We have a geotechnical engineer involved. We have an experienced structural engineer involved. And the main concern right now and the main goal for this project is to fully stabilize the house. As I mentioned before, the house was built and the foundation was very sturdy for the time built in the 60s. And it's actually over-engineered for supporting a 1,500 square foot single story structure, and it has drill piers that go into very solid ground. These are friction piers. The underpinning and the reinforcement of the foundation will be done in such a manner that even with erosion, the house is basically going to stay there, and that's our main project goal. And and the second point he brought up into stabilizing the creek hillside, I think that's a further discussion that we have to discuss with planning and the other agencies involved, FEMA, and whoever else will be willing to assist us. There should be in the long run, further mitigation. I think our goal here is just to enhance the natural qualities of the creek and make it as safe as possible, not only for the house, but for the community that surrounds it.
Great, thank you. With that, why don't we go ahead and do Commissioner Pilch, and then we'll go Commissioner McLeod, Momin, and Donaldson.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't have much to say. I think that good point from Commissioner McLeod about making the zoning simpler for the creeks and use the center of creek. That sounds like a good item for the future. But they're not changing the footprint from what I understand. So even if they, if the line is not correctly drawn, they're legal non-conforming. So I understand that this project can move forward that way. As far as the project goes, I like it. I think the design is consistent and fine, and I have no issues with the project. But since we've started talking about the creek, it does strike me that there is some impervious structure, impervious driveway. I assume it's going to be concrete or asphalt. One of the things we might want to think about is maybe asking whether or not the surfaces could be made impervious or in order to make sure that we don't have, especially with the driveway, we don't have fluids from the vehicles washing into the creek. So that would be my only request. Other than that, I think I'm ready to vote for the project. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I forget exactly which order I called it in, but why don't we go Commissioner McLeod next? Go ahead. Oh, it looks like you're on mute, Commissioner.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I brought up the creek issue, I guess in a way rhetorically, because it is an existing residence. It is already within whatever setbacks, you know, are there. And even if we moved that line, it would still be existing non-conforming, and I'm fine with it being improved, and I'm fine with the second story where it is. My other thoughts are perhaps the deck, instead of having a pier and a post going down straight down vertically, perhaps it could be cantilevered to some degree. The piers could be brought back towards the house. It sure looks like the house, if the existing foundation is on piers and there's some sort of perimeter foundation and there's really no new concrete work going on outside that perimeter, then you know, that should be of minimal risk to, you know, having debris or other materials, you know, dirt flow down the hillside. I mean, there are plenty of ways to protect with silt fences and wattle, straw bale rolls to keep silt from entering the creek. You know, and I'd also like to thank the architect and applicant for sending additional materials today. That's very helpful for me to see the pictures of the creek. I did not have time to go over there and look at it. But I think there should be some degree of cleanup of all the riprap concrete that's sort of just haphazardly placed around the creek area. Anything on the banks should be cleaned up, and I would advise just using planting to stabilize the creek slope and not doing retaining walls or any other kind of site work like that in that creek area. So I think it's an attractive design. I like this project, and I'm prepared to support it. So thank you.
Great. Commissioner Moban, go ahead.
I too like this project and I support this. I like the way the plan has been modified, the way the plan responds to the natural setting of the creek. It has been oriented to the creek. Most of the activities are facing to the creek as opposed to the existing plan. I like the way the second floor extension has been placed. It looks really well composed with that massing extended out. I think the deck enhancement is also a good improvement along the creek. I think landscape plan is not a requirement because this is not a substantial addition, but I think that is one thing that is missing. I would have really liked to see a landscape plan with planting around the decks and the way and the transition from the building edge to the creek. And as Commissioner McLeod mentioned, how the creek bank would be stabilized and things like that would have been addressed in the landscape plan. I also support Commissioner Phil's suggestion of having permeable paving and permeable surfaces so that the runoff would not pollute the water. I only have one additional suggestion. I think the all flat roofs kind of look a bit drastic to me in context of all surrounding houses with pitch roofs. It is particularly striking in the street frontage rendering on sheet A01. So I would suggest it is not a condition for approval, but I would really recommend having a pitch roof at least on the second story addition. Not it would be unrealistic to have all roofs pitched. I understand the cost implications and design modification efforts that would be required for that. But I would really like the second floor addition as a pitch roof that would go well with the overall setting, overall context along that side of the street. And so if the construction is done carefully, we're taking care of the natural ecology of the creek, I'm fully in support of this project.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yeah, I put some thought into this project. I do have concerns. This is a house that was built within the creek setback some time ago, and it's actually cantilevered now over the creek channel. And it should never have been built that way. And I think that those posts that support the kitchen and the back area of the house could probably be destroyed by floodwaters or by debris that would be carried by those floodwaters if there is a flood. And so I think that's a very serious concern. Generally with the design, I can say that I'm okay with the plan to transfer the garage into a living space. I'm okay with front yard parking exception that's been requested. I'm okay with the second floor addition. It's not too tall. And we had some comments from neighbors, a neighbor concerned about the shading and construction disturbance. And I guess in response to that, I would say that the project is well under the height limit. Our conditions of approval include construction hours, and our noise ordinance and other ordinances we have are intended to address construction impacts in a real reasonable manner. And in fact, every homeowner in Albany is potentially subject to temporary short-term construction impacts at some point. So having a home expansion next door, I don't think is a burden or it is a burden that almost all Albany residents share. So I don't see any big issues there. I'm okay with the contemporary design of the project. In fact, I really think that it could look like a very attractive home when it's done. But I really do have a big concern about the hydrology issues. And our ordinance is not adequate. Cities around us have much better, more realistic and more up-to-date, scientifically acceptable creek ordinances. And the question for me is, should we allow an upgraded home to continue to extend into the 20-foot setback area? I think a 20-foot setback area is really very modest. And even though these modifications that are proposed in the kitchen area are congruent with the existing footprint of the house and they're supported on the existing foundation, I think that this is still a major addition, and that back corner of the house this could be subject to damage in a flood, 100-year flood probably, but maybe even a smaller flood. I mean, it's really in the floodway, and I don't think we should have construction that way. So I would take an entirely different approach to this. I would respect our existing creek setback very rigorously. I would redesign the project so that no part of the house is within the 20-foot setback. I just don't think that rear corner of the house should be grandfathered in. I think it's at risk. So that really bothers me. And then with respect to the deck on the side, I think that's even at greater risk. Those 4x4, 4-inch by 4-inch posts going down into the creek, they could easily be wiped out in a flood with water and or branches coming down. They're at risk in a 100-year flood, which we haven't had around here in many years. So I could never vote to approve a deck that's on pillars like that, going down into what is obviously the floodway. And I know the applicant, the architect has said, well, he's going to just put new pillars in the same place the existing pillars are. And I suppose that's a good strategy to avoid having to get a new Corps of Engineers permit. But I think if they're going to put anything in the actual waterway like that, it probably does require a Corps of Engineers permit for an encroachment into the waters of the United States. So I would try an entirely different design. I think this is a very difficult site and a very unique site, and that it may be a buildable site, but it would be perfect for a variance so that you could move the entire home closer to the street, get a variance to allow a building in the front setback. I'm not sure what you do about the parking then, but you'd probably have to have a garage and one parking space maybe, and then go up. So I have to vote no on the project the way it is now. And I really think the right thing to do and the safest thing to do would be a different design and use our variance procedures to approve a project that uses the best part of the site, which is the front of the site. So those are my comments.
Commissioner McLeod?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if I could follow along or after Commissioner Donaldson's comments. I mean, I agree about the deck. I think it's at risk. I don't think the piers should be in the bank there. That's why I suggested cantilevering the deck. You could do some diagonal braces that could be based at the house to support it with, maybe some long cantilevered beams, steel or otherwise, to go out and support the deck. So there's no question about digging in the bank or in the creek setback. I think in my mind, I think it's still not clear where the actual setback is, but I would place it much further higher up on that slope at the top of the slope, which would put practically the entire house in the creek setback area. So it would essentially render the whole house unbuildable in that case. I'm confident that this foundation will withstand a flood if it is built on piers. Those piers, I don't know what depth they are. They're usually 12 to 20 feet deep. They are friction based. They could actually erode quite a bit at the top and still support the house. It looks like there's a perimeter concrete foundation, which would prevent water from going under the house. Unless the ground there would have to erode 5 feet or something. And I think the house would still stand up if it's on piers in that case. So, I'm okay with the house where it is, and I agree with the parking in the front yard, converting the garage. I think we should just require the deck to be cantilevered. That could take some extra engineering, but I think it would be wise. My last thought would be just to encourage the homeowners, clients to go all electric on this. You're doing such a big rebuild that it's a great chance to eliminate natural gas in the project and help us meet our climate action goals by stopping to burn, no more burning fossil fuels. And along with solar panels and battery backups, then you're in good shape for resiliency and doing the right thing environmentally. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Pilch.
Yeah, I also would like to hear from you, Chair, but just a couple of comments, or actually some questions. Just to follow along with what Commissioner McLeod said. Yes, going all electric would be great. I think the applicant already said that they would likely do that, and I have a heat pump, hot water heater, and a heat pump myself, and I'm very happy with them, and the cost has been very good. Staff, first of all, I guess I thought that there was a perimeter concrete foundation for the whole living space, but I'm hearing that there's piers, a pier foundation in certain parts, or is it just for the deck? Can someone clarify that? Staff?
Well, when I look at the plans, and perhaps the applicant could confirm it, but if you look at sheet A 4.1, it shows piers drilled into the ground below at key lines of the house, and then a perimeter foundation. It's called a pier and grade beam foundation. So the piers are, usually they're 16 to 18, sometimes wider in diameter, and then drilled down 15, anywhere from 12 to 20 feet into the ground. Those are small concrete piers we're looking at the deck. Those don't extend very deep into the ground, maybe a couple of feet or something, I don't know. But the actual house, I think we could have the applicant clarify that, the architect, but I think it must be on much deeper concrete piers, which is a typical way to build on unstable slopes or on hillsides. So, yeah, okay. So you can see there are, concrete grade beams, drilled piers.
Okay.
It's a very stable foundation, and that is typically the way we would build on a hillside or on unstable soils.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That answers that question. And then staff. So reusing the piers for the deck, is that legal non-conforming?
I mean, our zoning code doesn't go into the particulars of that construction method. It just talks about decks and other architectural features and setbacks, and a little more general terminology, and doesn't get into the technical aspects or the structural aspects of those.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would support Commissioner McLeod's requirement that we cantilever this rather than reuse those existing piers for the deck. And then removing the riprap, as someone else said, I think maybe Commissioner Moman, any existing riprap that's down there by the creek would be good. Okay, that's it for now.
Thanks. Commissioner Donaldson, did you have your hand back up? I think you're on mute, Commissioner.
I'm sorry. Yes, I am on mute. Yeah, Commissioner McLeod was looking at sheet A41, I think, and that's sections. The sheet I was looking at for much of my conclusions, and the one that troubled me the most was sheet A3.1, the south elevation. And that clearly to me shows that that corner of the house is on some kind of piers. And I think that the photographs that we saw today confirmed that. They look like more solid piers than this, but they were still piers there. So that's a big part of the basis of my comments. I just want to say that.
Sure, and I'm happy to jump in looking at it. I mean, me looking at sheet A3.1, those piers to me look like the deck piers, not the house piers. So I think those are separate. I think that's what we see of the deck location being on piers. But in general, my thoughts on this project is overall, I'm supportive of the project. To me, the really big difference on the encroachment into the creek setback is the fact that it's an existing non-conforming situation that's not being intensified. If this was a demo new construction and they were trying to retain that encroachment, I'd feel very different, because I feel like when you demolish something, you lose a non-conformity. But it's an existing condition that's legal. They're truly just kind of reskinning effectively and doing interior improvements. So there's no further volumetric encroachment into that setback. Their vertical addition is solidly within the buildable area. And so for those reasons, I have a really hard time saying that we have to take away a legal encroachment that exists when they're not voluntarily demoing it. I think the alteration of recladding a building and doing interior, kitchen remodel, bathroom remodel, that's the type of project that wouldn't even normally come to us if there wasn't and so I'm thinking about it in the context of if a vertical addition was not before us, or the parking wasn't before us, and they just wanted to contemporize the house's the architectural style and do an interior remodel. They could effectively get away with doing most of the ground floor without even being before us or having this conversation. So for me, sort of that encroachment issue kind of falls into that bucket, and I'm supportive of that aspect of the addition for that reason. When it comes to the deck, I do very much agree with, I think, the issues at hand. I understand that it's a allowable encroachment, but I would certainly be supportive of saying either retain the existing footprint, again, the existing nonconformity, and upgrade, the decking materials, the surface, and augment within the existing footprint of the deck, or if it's going to encroach further, that it needs to be in a cantilevered manner. So we kind of give them the two options: either stick with the footprint that you've got in terms of the existing encroachment and just contemporize it, improve it, or cantilever it. So that's sort of my position on the deck encroachment. In terms of the parking exception, I agree with what everyone else has said. I think this is supportable. They're still providing parking, off-street parking in this sense. And there's certainly plenty of lot area to provide that off-street parking in this situation. So I think it's appropriate that it's done in the front setback, but would also agree and be supportive of a condition of approval to require some sort of permeable paving system in that driveway to really minimize that runoff, whether it's sort of a Hollywood paver system or something of the like, rather than it being solid concrete, particularly given the close proximity to the creek. And then lastly, on the architectural style, I think it's designed well. I don't actually think that this house would benefit from a sloped roof form. I actually think the flat roof form really plays into the contemporary architectural style and sort of the rethinking of the architectural style of this home. So I'm fine with the flat roof system that's being proposed on it, as well as the materials that are being used. So all in all, basically, I support the project effectively with two conditions. One condition is on the deck of either retaining the footprint or doing it via cantilever system, and then second condition being permeable pavers within the front parking setback area. So that concludes my comments. And not sure if we have consensus here on a motion, but Commissioner Pilch, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sure, I'll try to make a motion then. I like your condition of if the deck does not change whatsoever, that we can the use of the piers would be okay, but if it changes it in any way, we require that it be cantilevered. So that would be one condition, and the other condition that the driveway be made of permeable pavement, and I would add any new hardscape be permeable as well. And so I would like to move approval with those two conditions.
Great. Does anyone support a second on that? Commissioner McLeod, a second on that? Okay, with that, then I'll go ahead and call that second. Yes. Okay, great. Then on that motion and that second, I'll go ahead and call the motion. Commissioner Donaldson.
I vote no. Okay. I hope the applicant has heard my concerns, and I hear yourselves too. I still think the corner of the house is encroaching into the floodway, and I think that's risky. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Commissioner Moman.
I vote yes.
Okay. Commissioner McLeod.
I'll vote yes, but I would, I'm looking at another photograph that does show an open area under the kitchen area. So that obviously is going to need some reinforcing. So I think that is an area that I think the structural engineer can address that. But, and I would encourage the applicant to pull the deck supports back as much as possible towards the house, and at least cantilever the deck as much as possible. I would really prefer the whole thing be cantilevered, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a yes vote.
That is a yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner,
yes, a yes.
qualified yes. Commissioner Pilch?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Donaldson voting no on that. So thank you. And as a reminder, story polls must stay up for the full duration of the 14-day appeal period on this item. So that item is approved as conditioned. Moving right along on our agenda, next up is item 7-2. This is a study session on a proposed mixed-use development at 1600 Solano Avenue. And similar to the sort of instruction I provided before the last item, we will go ahead and have a presentation from staff. We will then have a presentation from the project applicant. We will have the commissioners ask any questions of the two. We will then open it up for public comment and then bring it back to the commissioners. And as a reminder, again, particularly for folks in public comment, today is not an approval action item. This is a study session. So we are here to listen to the feedback from the community and provide suggestions for the project sponsor to continue to improve on the project to be brought back to us at a later date. So just to sort of set the expectations for today. And with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Waddy. My name is Jeff Vaughn, Community Development Director. And I'm going to kick this off very briefly and then turn it over to Carla Violet, who is a consultant working as an extension of staff. She is with the Urban Planning Consulting Firm of Urban Planning Partners based in Oakland, a well-respected firm that does a lot of this kind of work for municipalities all over the Bay Area. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things before we turn it over to Carla for a more detailed presentation. Chair Waddy, I will note there's quite a large crowd this evening on Zoom. I see, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 people present. So just to note that perhaps members of the public, when it comes time to address the commission, they may need to have a very brief comment. And we have received a fair number of written comments, and I know the commission and both us as staff, and I know the commission too also appreciates that and looks at that carefully. And as this project proceeds, we will make sure that we look at those carefully and make sure we're addressing the issues, concerns that are in those written comments, as well as anything presented this evening. A little bit of history. I won't go into details, but this is a property that has been before the commission on a couple occasions in the last few years. In 2013, April of 2013, there was an application for a commercial building that was approved. That was about a 6,000 square foot, primarily medical office. That was approved, but never implemented. And then the commission in March of 2020 had a study session on a different version of this project that you have this evening. Again, we don't need to spend a lot of time with those previous reports unless there's some specific questions.
Jeff, is this the same applicant in all these?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I did want to, so I did have an email exchange with Commissioner Pilch several over the last couple of days with a couple of questions that I thought would be important to summarize that exchange, just so all the commissioners have that same information. And I think Commissioner Pilch was inquiring about some of the comments we got, and I'll just highlight on them. We're not going to try to respond to everything this evening, but I did want to make sure that you knew what we had shared with him. First, there was a question about whether or not density bonus regulations apply only in areas that are major transportation corridors. And there are some special parking standards that apply only in major transportation corridors, but basically density bonus applies anywhere in the state where there's multifamily housing with affordable units designated. There was a question regarding the timing of when we make CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act determinations, and the city's practice is to do that at the time or very close to, if not simultaneously, at the time the final decision is made by the final decision-making body, which in this case, because it's the density bonus project, will be the city council ultimately. And then finally, there's been a lot of comments about whether or not this project as designed complies with either the city zoning ordinance or the density bonus regulations, and if these are being applied properly, and that in view of some people, it was not being applied properly and the project should be denied. And I just wanted to say that the density bonus regulations in state law have a very specific finding that's required if the city were to decide to deny or reduce the scale of the project. And that basically we're required to make findings that are quantifiable, direct, unavoidable impacts based on objective public health or safety standards. And that's a very high bar that basically the law is looking for us to use very specific, detailed, factual information to make those findings, which is different than the kinds of findings we would make on other kinds of projects that don't involve density bonus. So I just wanted to share that information so that you all have the same information going into this. And at this point, I would turn it over to Carla to give you a staff report. And at the end of that, we would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Good to be here tonight. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you all see that okay? Excellent. Okay, good evening, and thanks again for the introduction. Before you tonight is a preliminary review, also known as a study session, for design review and density bonus request for 1600 Solano Avenue. Tonight, I'm going to provide a planning presentation with background on the project and process. Next, we'll have the applicant present their project. Then we'll hold public comment and receive commission feedback. And just to reiterate, this is a study session as mentioned, so there will be no action taken tonight. And this is an opportunity for us to review the preliminary plans and then receive input from members of the public. So as Jeff mentioned, the city has received several written comments since the staff report was published last Friday. I wanted to just take a moment to summarize a few of the others before we jump into the presentation, just so you can keep them top of mind. Some of the issues raised included increasing the sidewalk width on Ordway to support safe pedestrian access, to enhance the design to be less generic, making the CEQA exemption determination in a timely manner, re-evaluating whether the density bonus is applicable to this project will help clarify that, increasing the number of parking spaces, preserving setback requirements, withholding approval of the project until the Tacoma Triangle intersection is redesigned for safety and accessibility, reducing project mass and limiting the use of the density bonus in the Solano commercial zoning district, clarifying the number of concessions, waivers, and kind of what is a study session versus a regular meeting. Hopefully we've clarified that now. And lastly, preserving the oak tree at the back of the lot. So hopefully this presentation will help clarify some of the questions that have come up in these written comments. Okay, so jumping into the background, the project site is approximately 0.12 acres or 5,000, a little over 5,000 square feet. It currently has an existing 4-unit residential building. The general plan designation is Solano Avenue mixed use, and the zoning is Solano commercial, which allows for mixed use development by right. Lastly, the site is served by AC transit stop on Solano Avenue, about 250 feet away from the site. And it is also about 1.5 miles from both the North Berkeley and El Cerrito Plaza BART stations. This is a snapshot of the zoning map, and you can see the site is in the Solano commercial zoning district, as mentioned. And here is a vicinity map. You can see the site is comprised of one corner parcel. And this is an existing street view facing east at the corner of Solano and Ordway. So as for preliminary project details, this is a mixed-use project. The residential component includes 12 units in a 4-story building that is up to 49 feet in height. So that's to the top of the parapet. And it has 2 affordable units included. The commercial component includes 3,163 square feet for medical services. There's both bicycle and vehicle parking provided. And currently there are 18 bicycle spaces and then 2 off-street vehicular parking spaces. These are the preliminary floor plans included in the plan set that is posted to the city's website. On the left-hand side, we have the basement. This has the 2 parking spaces, as well as the residential lobby, the electric and trash rooms. And then we move up to the first floor, which has the medical services space. And then floors 2 through 4 are all residential. In terms of unit mix, the project will be comprised of both 1 and 2 bedroom units. There are 3 1-bedroom and then 9 2-bedroom units proposed. With respect to project entitlements, the request is subject to design review, and this includes review of the project architecture and site planning. And then density bonus, which is set through state law, and it allows a developer to build additional dwelling units and obtain flexibility in local development requirements in exchange for building affordable housing. The design review purview, which is in the Planning Commission's capacity, is set in section 20.100.050 Standards of Review. Just to recap here, the Commission will evaluate the project in the future with general plan conformance, site planning, access, architecture, coordination of design details, and privacy is another consideration. Okay, and here is a conceptual rendering of the project from Solano Avenue facing south. The entrance shown here, hopefully you can see my hand right here, shows an entrance to the medical office. And then this view is just another rendering from the intersection of Solano and Ordway facing southeast. This view is from Ordway facing east, and then the entrance down here shows the entrance for the residential lobby. Okay, and here's a view from the south of the project from Ordway looking towards Solano. And lastly, this is a view from the east side of the project. Okay, with respect to density bonus, as I mentioned, it is prescribed in state law, and there are 2 words which are used throughout the staff report and that you'll hear quite a bit during this presentation. They are concessions and waivers. A concession is a reduction in site development standards or a modification of zoning code or architectural design. It could also be other regulatory incentives which result in identifiable and actual cost reductions. So examples of that could be reduced parking or setback requirements. And the number of concessions are determined by the affordability provided by the project. So for this project, 2 low-income units are provided, and that will allow for up to 3 concessions that can be requested by the project sponsor. And just please note staff report clarification. It had stated only up to 2 concessions are allowed, but the state density bonus law permits up to 3 concessions, given the level of affordability provided by this project, which is 25%. With respect to waivers, it's a little bit different. The city is not permitted to apply any development standard which physically precludes the construction of the project, including the density bonus and the granted concessions. So the applicant may request the city waive or reduce development standards that would otherwise prevent the density bonus project from physically being built. And examples of that could be building height or floor area ratio. And the distinction here is that the number of waivers that can be pursued are unlimited. So just to recap, concessions are based on level of affordability provided by the project, whereas waivers are unlimited. So with this project, the Solano Commercial Zoning District allows 63 dwelling units per acre. So we use that as the base project, and the current site could accommodate up to 8 units as that base. The applicant has requested a 50% density bonus to achieve the 12 units. So in exchange, the project proposes 2 units on site to be affordable to low income households, which is 25% of the base project. I'm sorry, let me just go back to that slide really quick. The table below here is taken from the staff report, so it just gives you that quick snapshot of the base units, the percentage of low income units, the number, the bonus, and then the total density bonus units, which gets us to the 12 unit total. With respect to waivers and concessions being requested, the waivers include an increase in floor area ratio from 1.25 to 3.79. Also, a building height increase from 35 feet, which is in the zoning code, to 49 feet. And then a reduction in open space requirement from 3,600 square feet to a little over 1,000 square feet. And for concessions, they are seeking elimination of the required 15-foot front and side setbacks along Solano and Ordway, as well as a reduction in the number of off-street parking spaces from 27 to 2. This project is also subject to the inclusionary housing ordinance, which means the developer is responsible for providing income restricted units. So the proposed 2 low income units would satisfy this requirement. And generally, once we get further along in the process and take this to City Council, we'll bring them an affordable housing agreement, which requires their review and action. And at that point, the developer will designate which units will be income restricted. Okay, moving on to another component of the preliminary plans. There are 18 bicycle spaces proposed, of which 16 are located in the basement for residents. And there's going to also be 2 outdoor bicycle racks at the corner of Solano and Ordway. So the table here just lays out the requirements for both residential and commercial uses and what's being provided. And they are providing a total of 4 additional bicycle spaces than required by the code. Okay, for vehicle parking, as I mentioned, the project sponsor is seeking concession to reduce the parking requirements. So for residential, although 12 spaces are required per the code, there will not be any provided. And for commercial parking, 18 spaces would have been required by the code, but only 2 spaces will serve the medical services. So the total reduction is 27. One thing to note in your packet this evening is the Senate Bill 330 supplemental application. And this is a separate application filing. It's part of a relatively new state law that went into effect on January 1st, 2020. And it does 2 things. It effectively locks in the project subject to the development standards from the date of filing. And it limits the number of total public meetings to 5 once a formal application is filed. We expect those meetings will largely be reviewed by Planning Commission and City Council. So we are not in a position to bring this to other advisory bodies because we need to adhere to this limit. And just so everyone knows, this meeting does not count toward the 5 meeting limit since it is a preliminary review. One thing to note is this project is subject to the Housing Accountability Act, which is in section 65589.5 of the Government Code. This will have the effect of somewhat limiting Planning Commission and City Council authority to substantially change the project scope. So effectively, the applicant can specify level of density, parking for both bicycles and vehicles, as well as building height, and the commission is required to evaluate what is presented on its face. You can certainly ask the developer for some consideration, but you cannot require substantial changes to the project. And related to that, if the city were to deny the project or require a reduction in density, as Jeff mentioned before this presentation, additional findings would have to be made and supported by a preponderance of evidence that clearly identifies specific adverse impacts. So there's just another level of review and analysis that would have to be prepared prior to action if there was a change that resulted in a reduction in the density. As also mentioned before, the project we believe is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15332 infill development. The city is working with a CEQA consultant and the city attorney on the preparation of supporting analysis, which will be prepared as part of this review. There's also case law as well as a provision in the density bonus law that supports this determination. And lastly, we do have some specific questions that we'd like to get into later when the commission has their discussion. So at this time, though, I'm going to take a pause and stop sharing because I think what will be next is allowing the applicant to give their brief presentation.
Chris, if you could bring up Kava Masi, that would be great.
You.
Yes, one moment. Kava, if you could raise your hand, that might help us a little bit. Oh, okay, I see you actually. Oh, nope, just kidding. One person. Oh. Okay, Kava, you can speak when you're ready.
Unmute myself first. Good evening, commissioners. Hi, Jeff. And thank you very much. The owners, the clients are on this call and available if needed. What I think might make the most sense is for me to actually get Erica to share the drawings with us so we can go through it quickly. I'll be short given how good a job Carla did to explain the project. So, and hello. So Christopher, can you let Erica share share her screen so we can look at the whole space?
Oh,
go through them quickly. As you can imagine, the fact that we've been at this for over 10 years speaks volumes to how difficult the site it is to make sense of. From the northeast corner to the southwest corner, it drops by 8 feet, which is quite a bit. And given how tight a site it is, it's just a difficult one to try to come up with something that works. So maybe Erica, you could go to the ground floor plan, the one that shows the basement, and we can quickly go through it. That's great. We have a really good landscape architecture firm called Mantel or Mantle that's been helping us, and we'll get more defined drawings. But the portion to the south of the property is where the parking is, and then the actual lobby that leads to the elevator that will take you up. And then the portion that's left white on the left side of the site is actually unexcavated, because that excavation is monumental for a project of this size, and we decided not to dig. So maybe next, please. So on the ground floor, again, it was sort of explained already, but on the upper left-hand corner is the entry into the residential and the commercial side of the project. And most of this floor, which is at the same level as Solano, is actually the two medical or dental, potentially, spaces that we've envisioned. The other move that you will see on the right-hand side is to actually give a little breathing room to that oak that was brought up. There's a 10-foot setback from the south property line, and then it jogs back to 5 and so on. And that was also to give a little breathing room to Dr. Goldberg's, I'm sorry. I'm so used to calling him by his first name. Paul next door, was to just give a little bit more light and air to that house. So next, please. The rest of these floors are fairly similar. There are units that are in blue that are 2-bedroom units, and then the pink is 1, and this same floor plan actually repeats itself 3 times going up to the roof. There is a little sort of cutout where the building to our east has a sort of a exaggerated bay window coming out. So we set that portion of our building back to give that building a little bit of breathing room also. So maybe, given that the rest of second, third, and fourth floor are the same, there's a small roof deck, and we sort of put it in the middle so that it's not sort of intruding into the neighbors on our sides in any way, by if there's any sort of one speaking up there or any action to be a nuisance. So we've sort of isolated it in the center. Next, please. And these small decks that are only 3 foot by 3 foot off of the living rooms of the units are to allow for someone to sort of step out, but not a big gathering where you end up with, more than one person out there. And also people will be hesitant to put stuff out there. I've always avoided balconies on the exterior of buildings, but I think in this case, this can be easily managed. Next, please. The view to the left is of the entry into the residential portion that goes up the steps. The one on the right is the other entry that leads to the elevator that takes one up to the upper floors. Next, please. The roof deck, which was designed in cooperation with the landscape architect, but a little bit of seeding, and a bunch of planting, which we could most likely use for C3 and rainwater harvesting. Okay. Next, please. Elevations you already saw. The building is, I mean, compared to the houses, obviously a larger structure, but in general, pretty modest. One dimension is it's 40 feet by a little over 100 feet on Ordway, so not a enormous site. The two other sites and sections through the thing. Please keep going, please. Some material that we are considering core 10 for the planters, the wood trellis that we've used on some other projects in Berkeley, and many other projects use them, a little bit of wood cladding, and then the perforated corrugated steel that is what the balconies are made out of. I think that's it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the extent of it. I will be all ears, and hopefully we get to come back in front of you with some modifications and make this happen this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does that conclude your presentation, Carla?
It does conclude.
Seems okay.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Then with that, why don't we go ahead and quickly turn it back to commissioners if there are any questions before we go ahead and move to open this up for public comment. Any questions from commissioners? All right, Commissioner Pilch.
Yes, thank you for the presentations. And one question I have is that there's no windows to speak of on the east side and very few on the south side. Can you speak to the motivation for that?
Right. Well, the east side is dictated by the fact that the building is on the property line. And the only place where we could actually put windows is where that setback, that little cut in for the building next door is. So it's a pretty common thing that happens in cities where there's zero lot line and you're basically not allowed to have windows and openings. It's a fire code issue. That's on the east side. On the south side, I guess there was two things that was driving it. One was the fact that facing south, sun's pretty harsh and so on. So that was really one small part of it. But the other was that as much as we're looking at this building, people in the building are looking back at the houses to their south. And I thought maybe a little, restrained on the size of the windows would make them feel a little bit more private.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question. In the parking area, there seems to be a little alcove as if you were a vehicle entering the garage just to the left where you might be able to put some more bicycle racks. Do you think that area would accommodate bicycle storage?
So as you come in there, there's the door that leads you from parking into the, is there a way to actually put that put the drawing back up again, Christopher? Or Carla, if you have it. Perfect.
Yes, right in that, yeah. And so just as you, to the left, there appears to be a little space that would not be,
to the left of what?
As you enter the, through the door, through the garage door, there's a little bit of space next to the stair.
I see. Yeah, there's definitely the potential to put a couple, maybe back to back, like parallel parking
Yeah, because the reason I ask is because if some people have long bikes, if they have trailers with kids, or maybe these longer cargo bikes, and that might be a good space for some racks that are parallel to the stairs there. So it sounds like that it's possible to use that space that way.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your answers. That's it for me.
Okay.
Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. There have been some comments about the sidewalks. As we're looking at the site plan, that's a good plan to look at. Is the sidewalk width staying the same? I don't see any dimensions for the width of it along Ordway.
Yeah, we were hoping not to disturb it much. The landscaping that's shown in the public right of way, which is to the west of the edge of the building, is actually what's existing there now. That we even are keeping the driveway into the car garage in the same spot. So yeah, we were trying not to disturb it much. I think what's there is about 4 feet, the concrete part that is between the landscaping area. Actually, you know what? Where we can look is the survey. Erica, can you go to the survey, please? There. Oof, this is a hard one to.
I don't see a dimension there.
Yeah,
Okay, well, that was one quick question. Just the width of it, it's not meant to change. The slope of it is not changing. It's all just pretty much staying exactly.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah, okay. I just one other question, and it's mostly about the bike parking, which I don't see how you get 16 bikes in that space. So that would be something you'd have to clarify.
Oh, Erica has a picture for you. Will you put it up? There you go. That's how we do it. It's like the lift version of cars, but it's for bikes.
Okay. All right. And then my other question about bikes is that I think ordinance says secure parking. And is the lobby open to the public? Anybody can enter the lobby, or is that keyed, or how is that controlled?
To be honest with you, haven't gone there yet, but I would imagine that it would be, I think it's hard to key it just because the elevator and the handicap accessibility will get sort of limited if we did that. So one possible thing is to actually secure the bikes by putting a gate out in front that goes totally away. So there are ways to deal with it, but I think that door needs to somehow, it needs to be controlled by there's no one there. We hadn't really thought about that a whole lot.
Okay, I guess my point is that the bike should be secure and not open to just anybody who could walk in. And then my last question is kind of a general question. It's more, will the building be all electric? We're trying to encourage all electric.
Yes.
Yeah, so no gas appliances whatsoever, no gas piping,
Correct.
no meters. Okay, that's great.
No gas whatsoever.
And no solar panels on the roof? I don't see anything on the plans.
We have not shown any, but we will talk it over and we'll add some.
Okay, all right, thanks. That's it for me for right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Commissioner Momin.
Yeah, I do have questions about the entry. I wasn't very clear about the main entrance. I earlier thought the main entrance is from the Ordway Street. And at a closer look, I found out that the main entrance is from Solano Avenue, but then that entry is shared with the medical offices and their visitors. And it's also, approached through a deep, long corridor. So was there any option explored in which the main residential entry could have been provided on Ordway Street with a nicer lobby and more secure and gate or door, something like that, and the elevator would not open onto the main level,
Right.
the lobby where it is shared with the medical offices.
Right. Well, that's exactly what we have. The main lobby entry into the residential is off of Ordway. And
Then,
that other door is basically just an exit out.
no, but why is the elevator opening into that?
Because we're trying to give handicap access to the medical also. It's again, I mean, it looks fairly flat on Solano, but there's quite a bit of slope, and there was no room for ramps and sort of doing a lot of acrobatics to try to get the thing to work. So, but
Okay.
Let's see.
So how would the security would be managed with medical offices and their visitors coming through the same door as the residents?
Actually, I think the idea we had was that the elevator door for the medical would have to be open with a different, somehow we have to control that. Why don't I have that answer for you next time? If we make it back in front of you, we'll deal with a security and a hardware consultant and try to think it through so that it's not an issue.
Sure. Yeah, and then if the main entry is of Ordway Street, it is just 7 foot 8 inches currently. Would it be possible to make it a little, taller so that it feels like a main entrance then?
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that the roof over that lobby is going to have to extend out and reach out to where it hits Solano. And if it's flat, which it needs to be because it's a usable space, then you end up with a step. As it is, we already need to have a step in that section. But let me work on it a little harder now that I know you're interested in it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, most of the commissioners have had design detail questions. I have some more general questions and over kind of big picture questions, I guess, about the project as overall. Let me see where I can start. I would like to ask staff to, I don't know if you need to answer now for my questions, so it might take too much time, but I'd like to ask staff, how might we get very low income units in this in this project instead of low income units? And I really would like to see a little evaluation from the staff. I'd like to see the staff put some work into that. What kind of density bonus requirements might have to be implemented, and how many low income units could we get? I think that's where the real significant need for affordable housing lies. I want to ask staff, whatever happened to our requirements for a project pro forma that demonstrate the actual economic cost reductions and how they would pay for the affordable units? I don't see any of that in the staff report or in the application, and I in our own guidance, I think it was called for. I'm not sure about the base project calculation, and when you have a density bonus project, this is really critical. I think it's not as simple as taking the 63 units per acre and dividing it by the acres to come up with 8 units as the base project. First of all, if you make the division, the staff comes up with 7.4 units. So how do you round up? Why in the heck do we round up when normal mathematical process would be to round down? So why is the base project 8 and not 7? That is one question I have. And then the project site, or the zoning, our zoning uses an FAR of 1.25, I think, to cover both the commercial and the housing components of the project. So our zoning allows an FAR of 1.25 on that. I think that the applicant should prove that to get a base project of this size, I think the applicant needs to be able to demonstrate that a theoretical base project with 3,000 or more square feet of commercial space and 7 units of residential housing could fit within our 1.25 FAR envelope. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I suspect in any event that the base project we have allowed here, or that's being shown here, may be too large. And I would really like to see an analysis of several options for what the by right project would be, or the base project by right project called for in these guidelines, in this on the plans, and how it really is warranted at the way it's proposed. So I'm worried about the fact that it might be too simplistic an analysis. And finally, in our general plan, we have a very specific policy for the development along Solano Avenue that limits the state density bonus for affordable housing to a maximum FAR of 2. This project is coming out at 3.79, much, much higher. Does the state density bonus law allow concessions that violates the city's general plan policies? Or otherwise, does this mean that the state density bonus law makes our general plan policies unenforceable for Solano Avenue? I'm afraid that the answer is probably that they are unenforceable, but I really think I want to see staff justify that. I want to see an analysis that of the density bonus law that shows where the state is overriding our applicable general plan policies. So those, I have some other comments, I think, but that's all I'm going to bring up right now. And I'll try to integrate my other thoughts into the later comments. Oh, one other question I had. It appears that the applicant is saying that the existing building on the site has 4 units of housing. I looked at it and I have trouble seeing that. Maybe that's true, but it looks to me like it's a former single family home. And I don't know if that's significant at all, but if we're removing 4 units and getting 12, that's a disadvantage. And anyway, I just questioned that. I was surprised by that comment when I saw it, and that statement that the existing site has 4 units of housing. I don't think it's been occupied much at all in the past few years in any event. Okay, those are my comments for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have just a couple quick questions, and these are similar, sort of some higher level questions that might be best for staff. The first one is actually, is a medical use a principally permitted use in the Solano zoning district here? You guys know?
Yes, I was just going to pull up the, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe so. I'll double check it, but professional medical offices are permitted use without a conditional use permit.
On the ground floor. Okay.
Yeah.
That was just one question I had. And then the second question, which is more related to sort of density bonus. I know with the state density bonus program, local jurisdictions are significantly constrained about reducing density, which effectively is units. It could be bedrooms, it could be massing, sort of interpreted in that way, or making changes that increase the cost of the project. My question, though, is, that's really focused on housing production. So I'm wondering, is the medical service, which effectively takes up a full floor of massing here, is the medical service a component of the project that we have truly pure discretion over in that sense, where we could remove that from the project and reduce the floor? Since again, that effectively makes the project cheaper, one would imagine. You don't have to build a floor of medical office and it's not reducing the residential density. So I'm curious where our discretion falls vis-a-vis the medical use portion of the project. And if you guys don't have that information, that's fine. We can come back with that later, but that's certainly, I think, an important question, because obviously a lot of the commentary that we're receiving, and I'm sure we'll hear more of it, but that we've received so far kind of fall a lot into both the massing bucket and the parking bucket. And, if we can't touch the massing related to the residential, what's left? And it's actually the massing related to both the parking and the medical uses. So I'm just curious where our flexibility comes on that front.
I think that might be a question that we should research a little
Follow up
bit.
on. Okay, absolutely. I think that's great. Okay, I think that's actually, and then I did have a question for the project team, and it's probably more for the property owner, but if the architect's here, maybe you can take a stab at it. More just curious, when projects that are, a bit larger than what we're used to come before the commission, they often cause, a fair amount of consternation within the community. And on this particular property, it's come before us several times, and the projects have never happened. And I always personally get a little bit frustrated when we kind of go through that goodwill exercise with the community, where we're having to make really difficult decisions to approve projects where many members of the community are not supportive of the project, and then they don't go anywhere. And so I'm just curious, if the project team can talk a little bit about why those previous projects never amounted to anything, and if the sponsor can give us any confidence that this project is actually at some level shovel ready and can actually be built if we move forward with it.
Well, I can certainly make an attempt, but I think it might be more prudent for the owners to chime in if you're willing to. Raise your hand if you're willing to. Otherwise, I'll tell them what I think and what I've heard you say. So, and I actually know the reason for it not ever happening was really the cost of construction. And we were sort of required, I was going to use a different word, we were required to have 27 parking spots for the previous project that got approved, which required a second basement with lifts. And by the time we got some real construction numbers, it was just astronomically high. I mean, it made no sense. So part of the reason this seems to be the right way to go is the fact that we actually have found a mechanism to get the thing built without that kind of a burden on the rest of the project and that number of parking and that kind of digging. It was like we were building the Hoover Dam down there with the retaining walls and the concrete that was required. So that really comes down to that one issue. And at the end, these projects need to make financial sense.
Great, thank you for that. That's it for the questions that I have. So if other commissioners don't have any other questions at this time, why don't we go ahead? Oh, yes, Director Bond.
Yes, thank you, Chair Waddy. I need to correct myself. I looked carefully at the footnotes in our use table. A ground floor professional office does require a conditional use permit and would be part of the package of actions that you would ultimately need to take. So I appreciate the question, and I'm glad you caught that for us.
Okay, great. And this would be considered the ground floor, even though there's obviously sort of a partial floor on the Ordway front with the parking. This is a ground floor use effectively.
That's another good question. It does, the ground, we should probably take a careful look at that.
Okay, great. But that's good to know. Commissioner McLeod, you had another question.
I guess it is relating to the offices and why medical offices. Is there some particular reason for that, or?
Yes, that is the owner's day job. Dr. Paul Castrovi is an orthodontist, and he's of that world. So,
so this would be the owner's practice, or maybe?
Don't quite know that yet.
Okay, all right. Oh, but okay, so they're familiar with that kind of office and know. Okay, all right. Thank you.
By the way, Mr. Casrobi has been putting up his hand. I don't know if we wanted him to, and I assume he's an owner. And do we want to allow him to speak?
Sure, sure. I'm happy to unmute him if you have anything additional to answer in terms of the questions that have been raised. Chris, are you able to let him speak?
I'm not seeing it on my end. Can
Paul Casrobi has his hand up?
I think he's at the bottom of the queue right now. If you raise hands.
Yep. Okay, Paul, you can go ahead and speak.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, great. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak for a couple of minutes. I definitely want to echo the sentiments that Kava brought up in terms of, that was a great question you asked as to why draft one, or actually there have been so many drafts, I don't know what number they are, but that initial project did not take off. It was really ultimately, we appreciate the fact that we got a permit, but we got really no breaks on any front, and it made it so cost prohibitive. I mean, you got to look at a return on investment on a project that just made it practically impossible to build. So that's why we did not proceed with that plan. So basically the whole retooling of the idea was based on the fact that what is a neighborhood community needs, and based on me practicing what I do, clearly having the floor unit being something that is for medical use, it makes a lot of sense. And my intent is to occupy that space. And generally, I find that an owner-occupied type of a property means that the building is better taken care of. And so that is the intent. And that was a great question as well. So I just wanted to answer that.
Great, thank you. With that, let's go ahead and open up public comment. Just given the hour of the evening and the number of folks in the queue right now, we are going to have public comment be 2 minutes per person. Again, this is a study session. We expect there will be additional public hearings on this item at a later date. So public comment will be 2 minutes per person. And now is the time to go ahead and raise your hand if you would like to provide public testimony on this project. And certainly if you don't want your 2 minutes, don't feel like you have to use it, but we appreciate all of the feedback as this is a study session. So with that, Chris, can you go ahead and start calling the public comment?
Yep. First speaker, Jeremiah, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Thank you. So one of the things I noticed is the fireplace on the roof, or the barbecue pit. I was just wondering what source of fuel that was going to be, and how you're planning on extinguishing it. I didn't see fire sprinklers up there, a fire extinguisher, or a fire hydrant. But I'm not sure, there's that song, the roof. Anyway, I don't want to get into it, but just having fires on the roof is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of unsafe possibly. So it looks cool though. I would love to have a, barbecue up there. It sounds nice. Also, yeah, solar panels. Didn't see any solar panels. But there's a lot of talk about this doctor's office. Let me turn on my radio. I was wondering maybe like a daycare, because this is a big project. It's a big building. I was just wondering, maybe a little daycare office, considering all the people living there. And the best point I want to bring up though, all jokes aside about the barbecue on the roof, just gotta talk to the fire department about that one. All jokes aside, is that this affordable, very affordable, very low income housing. I was just on the Albany's website. I only got 30 seconds, but if anybody wants to look, Albany's got a living wage, which I guess technically is not the minimum wage. The state's minimum wage is like $15 an hour. Albany's living wage, it distinguishes whether it's health insurance or not. It's $18 or $16 approximately. So what is fair housing? It should be based on the Albany's living wage. So what is that? 40 hours a week, 2/3 of your income. So the rent should only be X amount of dollars maximum based on Albany's living wage. Thank you very much.
Okay, time's up. Next speaker is Bryce. You have 2 minutes starting now. Bryce, did you want to speak? You're muted. Okay, maybe we'll come back to Bryce. Next speaker, Caitlin. Caitlin, you have 2 minutes to speak. Starting now.
Apologies, now I am unmuted. My name is Caitlin Brown, speaking on my own behalf as a frequent visitor by foot, bike, and car to Solano Avenue. I wanted to say I strongly support this project. This is exactly what the density bonus law is meant to be used for. It's an infill development along a commercial corridor with very high quality transit access. I wanted to note that the base density calculation is correct. The state density bonus law provides that fractional units shall be separately rounded up to the next whole number. So that's how the staff got the base density of 8 units per acre, 8 units for this project. I also want to note that the city cannot enforce a more restrictive density bonus law. I heard the planning commissioner's comment about the requirement for floor area ratio being only a certain number. I would strongly urge the city and the applicant to strengthen the explanations for the waivers and the concessions. The requested height waiver references cost reductions rather than explaining why the project is proposed would be physically precluded by the applied standard. Whereas the requested concession for parking makes no reference to the requirement that the incentive results in identifiable and actual cost reductions. But based on the applicant's comments, it likely has these costs and can link them to providing affordable housing. If at all possible, I would also like to see the city require the
Time's up. Gave a little extra time on that one. Next speaker, Clay Larson.
Christopher, you only gave her 1 minute to start.
No, we started a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Next speaker, Clay Larson. You have 2 minutes to speak, starting now.
You set the timer at 1 minute again. There you go. Yeah, I had some questions about the staff report. Actually, I think there were some errors, and in other cases that there wasn't a very complete analysis. Regarding setbacks, there's a reference to, there's a statement that there's a 50-foot front setback on Solano commercial. I don't believe that exists. It's certainly not clearly stated. There is an external side setback requirement where the property is directly across the street from a residential district. It turns out there's a small sliver at the south end of the Solano parcel that is across the street from residential. I'm not sure that would kick in the setback requirement, but if it did, there's also a daylight plane requirement. None of this was discussed in the staff report. The Albany ordinance has development criteria for affordable units. Basically, it requires that the affordable units should have the same bedroom mix as the market rate units. The project will have a majority of 2-bedroom units, so I don't think the 2 one-bedroom affordable units will satisfy that requirement of the zoning ordinance. I think the city should the applicant's requesting a waiver to reduce commercial parking. I think the city should have legal staff, their city attorney, look at that. I have some questions whether that exists. I agree with Doug's questions about residence units. I was puzzled by that too. I think it's just inartful language. And finally, as Jeff mentioned, this project has been before the city 3 times. I think that should have been included in maybe the background section of the staff report, because I just became aware of that. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Next speaker, Don. Don, you have 2 minutes to speak, starting now.
Thank you very much. My name is Don May, and thank you for listening to me. My wife and I are in strong support of the proposed project. Mixed-use buildings like this are the perfect type of development for this area. People should live as close to restaurants and other businesses as possible so they can minimize their impact to the environment by minimizing driving. Across the country, development is trending towards mixed use, which is this combination of both commercial and residential for a reason. It works. People live in their homes and shop and eat within walking distance, and Albany is absolutely blessed to have a project like this in the works and should do everything it can to encourage more. This project will also bring much needed affordable housing to the area. My wife and I struggle to live here, so having affordable housing stock will help us and other working class residents tremendously. Parking should not be a problem for this project because so many of the reasons people need a car for transportation are right outside their front doors. People who lived in mixed-use developments like this have greatly reduced need for cars. In fact, many people who live in such environments do not have any cars. They simply walk to where they need to be. Although we personally drive to Solano Avenue for Barney's nearly every day, we are more than happy to pay for parking via a parking meter. In fact, parking meters are the #1 recommended way that parking should be managed, according to Dr. Donald Shoup, S-H-O-U-P, a Yale-educated professor of urban planning at UCLA who is considered the guru of parking management across the United States. In fact, with the proper use of parking meters, any level of parking demand can be properly managed. Please visit his website at www.shoupdog.com. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Next speaker, Bradley. Bradley, you have 2 minutes beginning now.
Thank you. My name is Brad Engwall. I live on Peralta, just a block away from the property that is proposed to be developed. I have significant concerns about the mass of the building and the way that it not only is very tall compared to other buildings around it, but very tall and very wide, just the whole mass of the building. If you look around, there's nothing that would come close to that kind of mass around the neighborhood. It would jut out from the building that sits next to it, the Cheesty Law Office, that Cheesty Law Offices occupies, and would actually overhang Solano, the sidewalk, because of the balconies and the cantilevered nature of the second, third, fourth stories. And I think the medical offices is what generates the number of parking spaces that has been mentioned by other speakers, is that they're asking for a variance for. And that really doesn't need to be medical. I'm a physician myself. I know that, the number of parking spaces needed for patients is significant. We're bringing people in from significant distances. We don't have a lot of public transportation to this area, which is a significant problem. We have a bus line. A mile and a half, people are not going to walk that generally, or bike it from BART. So I think that this places a significant parking burden on already overcrowded side streets off of Solano, like where I live, and it's impossible to find parking on our street during the day.
Well, hi, my name is Mike Meyer. I'm a neighbor of the project. I live literally catty corner across the street. I'd like to direct attention to the corner of Solano and Tacoma Avenues. That corner is busy, it's active, it is extraordinarily dangerous. Like most of us, I've been working from home for the last year and a half, 2 years. I get to see people behaving badly on that corner all day, every day. There is huge potential for vehicle-on-vehicle conflict and more scary vehicle and pedestrian traffic. On the north side of Solano, you have a bus stop on the east side of that corner. You have shops and restaurants on the west side with delivery vehicles that have no choice but to pull over to the side and unload their materials. You have angled parking, people backing out of parking spaces and drivers awaiting their parking space, stopping traffic dead. And then most importantly, you have the odd wide angle onto Tacoma Avenue off of Solano, which invites drivers to do all sorts of dangerous things like take U-turns in a crosswalk and so forth. The south side of Solano presents similar vehicular challenges. There's also a bus stop, there's also angled parking, there are shops and restaurants with delivery requirements. This is an impacted corner. And to add this kind of density and pretend that people aren't going to use vehicles to access the project is dangerous. And I'm surprised I haven't seen a pedestrian get struck in the last year and a half. But thank you for listening. Thank you for your time.
Next speaker, Earl. Earl, you have 2 minutes starting. Starting now.
There. Okay. Okay. All right. There's 12 units and no parking. Everybody has a car. Where are these people going to park? This is, there's already no parking in the neighborhood and on Solano. This is one of Solano Avenue's most wild and crazy intersections with the streets coming in at odd angles. Are there any plans for traffic calming in that intersection? And if there is the city going to do it, or is the developer going to contribute to that? Also, the building is taking up every square inch of that lot. So 2 or at least 2 beautiful trees are going to be murdered, as is the little microclimate that's around there now. And all our little furry friends are going to be evicted. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the size of the unit. It's gigantic for the neighborhood, but mainly it's the parking issue. You can't have a building with all of those units and not have anywhere for these people to park and expect the city of Albany to basically subsidize the parking for this building. Thanks for listening. I've got 10 seconds, so goodbye.
Okay, next speaker, Mark Bluestein. You have 2 minutes beginning now.
Yes, my name is Mark Bluestein, and I live 2 blocks from the intersection where this proposed project is to be built, and I frequent the area regularly, mostly on foot. My concern is shared with Earl about the parking. I do support infill development and increased housing, particularly low density, but I do feel that the concession to go from 27 spaces to 2 is really a tremendous concession. I don't know, maybe that's within the constraints of the law, but it seems and when you consider that actually one of those is a handicap spot, there's essentially no parking for the residents. And although people will in the future maybe use less cars, I defy most people here to say they don't have a car at all. And with 12 residences, I think some parking is necessary. The street itself in front on Solano has a lot of driveways, so that even though those buildings there have some parking, there's only 4 spaces on that block there. And all the residential areas are already now completely filled. And with I think I counted 5 restaurants within a block of that. at this point, and not everybody is walking to it, especially with the parklets that we have now. And also, I'd like to have the staff presentation posted. I didn't see where it was posted, so I can understand better. Thank you.
Is this for me, Elizabeth Thorsmus? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, I am a property owner, a hated landlord, because I'm a damn good landlord, on Solano, 3 doors from this project. I have 2 retail shops and 2 units in the back, and I've completely redone the building, kept it from walking off the foundation. I put a ton of money into it. And my tenants in the back, there are 2 tenants, do have no parking. And a lot of people don't realize that Solano Avenue, behind shops and above shops has a lot of housing, and it's great housing for people, for the waitresses and people. And there's no parking for those people. So they have to go and share with the people in the houses on the side streets. Solano is not a walking street. All you people who say it is clearly haven't walked it. And you haven't tried to get parking to get your plumber in at 10 in the morning, for example. Parking is a huge problem on this block, a huge, huge, huge problem. And here we are with a kind of not very interesting building with kind of a greedy footprint, if you ask me. Nothing to write home about, all of it. Product of someone who's mastered concessions and waivers, if you ask me. And it has room for the dentist and his receptionist if she is handicapped. Low-income units, how low? There's low, there's very low, there's all kinds of units. I want to know how low, but we're trading 2 of them for 27 parking spots and minimal setbacks. This is, to me, I've been watching these policies march through the state, and here it is in all its kind of ugly glory to me, this monstrosity of a building where there is no parking. There just isn't. And if there is, let's go to lunch tomorrow, Kajini's, all right? You drive. I'll take you.
Okay, next speaker, Catherine. Catherine, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, my name is Catherine Fairbanks. I'm a business owner right across the street from the planned development. I've just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to create a day spa, a destination day spa. I fought for 2 years to get parking, medical parking, 12 spots. So if I had to work this hard to get 12 spots of parking from the city of Berkeley and Albany combined, how fair is it that this business would get all these cutbacks? I have people coming from Danville. They're not going to ride the bus. I have people coming from San Francisco. They're not going to ride the BART and walking out 20 minutes from the BART to get here. I have people driving from Walnut Creek, San Pablo, and Pinole. We are a destination day spa. There is nothing in the area like it. So that's my first complaint. My second complaint is 5 stories high. I welcome any of you to come out here. Solano Avenue is charming. It's beautiful. To bring in a 5-story building would just knock down the charm on this avenue, to cut down these old growth trees. I mean, I invite you to come out. The trees that they plan to cut down are gorgeous. They house owls. They that take care of rodents. I mean, and it's just, we'll just lose the charm and the light that feeds a lot of these houses, sunlight, and these businesses. We don't need mold any more than we have already with a moist environment.
Next speaker, Peter Goldberg. You have 2 minutes to speak starting now. Peter, you're still mute. Do you want to speak?
Hello. Sorry, I was on mute. I'm the owner directly adjacent on the south side. We have a psychotherapy practice. I noticed that on the plan there's a section where there's no setback at all from our property on the south side. Unlike on the east side where there's setbacks, open space. Obviously, the construction of this gigantic building is going to make it impossible for us to work in our offices for the duration of the construction, which is a concern to us, you might say. I'll leave it to others to talk about the general impact. I think people have been quite articulate so far. I'm in favor of, housing in the area. It just seems this is overreach. I also just want to say, in reference to the fact that this hasn't worked up to now, that the owners and the architect have not dealt with the neighbors at all at any point in a way that could facilitate some kind of community, some communion amongst us about this project. Thank you.
Next speaker, Catherine Fairbanks. You have 2 minutes.
I already spoke. I'll leave it to somebody else.
Oh. Next speaker, Brian Martin. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks. My name's Brian Martin. I'm in support of the project and I asked the developer to make it higher if possible. We need more housing in Albany, particularly low-income housing, and for equity, we need it spread around the city. I live on Adams Street, where there already is no parking next to San Pablo Avenue, home of the lowest income Albany residents, and half a block from a recently approved 207 unit development, which I estimate will produce hundreds of spillover cars parking in and driving around my neighborhood. The commission would be making a stand for equity by approving this project after going over it carefully and providing its input. Once it's formally submitted, it's located in a wealthier part of town, well served by public transit and walkable shops. I have seen the broad promotion in the San Pablo Avenue specific plan of dense developments along one street, while commissioners advocate for allowing 0 parking spaces and 8-story buildings adjacent to single-family homes, with little regard to any impacts on the existing homes. So I see no reason for the city to do anything differently here. And it would be equitable to treat this area in the same kind of way. Recent housing element documents recommend increasing heights and density on Solano Avenue. I asked staff to explain how the design would be affected of this property if under those looser restrictions. I appreciate the developer choosing in advance to forego windows to the east so as to not impact existing homes. I hope this is remembered when 8-story developments at my backyard are before the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Allison. You have 2 minutes starting now. Allison, you're mute.
I'm not Allison, and I received the note to unmute.
Did you want to speak on this?
So it was sent. It was sent to the wrong person.
Okay. Next speaker, Howard Graves. Howard, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Okay, my name is Howard Graves. I live on Ordway Street, a long-term resident of Albany. I want to talk about big picture issues. First is the density bonus award. I believe that this award is in error by planning and zoning. Solano Avenue is not a transit corridor. It's a low-speed, high parking street As a shopping destination, as others have attested to, people drive to park here. There's only one bus line that runs only 3 times every hour. We looked up the definition of a California city transit corridor, and that requires a regular bus route 4 times an hour. Our buses are empty for the most part. We're over 1.5 miles from the transit hub like BART. So I think this is a misapplication of state law. This is not a transit corridor. It is a shopping center and a shopping destination. Secondly, the corner that is built on is one of the most dangerous in Albany. There's no crosswalk from this building site, even across Solano, to the bus stop on the other side because it's so dangerous. This would require to build safely build and occupy a building like this would require an engineering and traffic study. And I've sent a letter to the Traffic Commission asking them to become involved. There will be injuries, there will be deaths if you build something this dense in such a dangerous place without stoplights and redesigning the intersection. Finally, a proposed project this large is going to be a dramatic change to Solano Avenue. The city needs to have a citywide discussion that includes a city council and a voter initiative.
Next speaker, Beth Gleghorn, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Beth Gleghorn. I live on Tacoma, which is right across from this dangerous intersection. We see already that our street, which is a very, very narrow street, is impacted by people searching for parking all of the time. They turn around in people's driveways and hit the cars of other parkers and of the owners. And I think that to use the law to take a requirement for 27 cars and turn it into 2 cars is absurd. It may be legal, but it's unrealistic. We're already overcrowded with cars, and these people will have cars. You know, people do not take a bus everywhere. They drive to Walnut Creek, they drive to San Francisco, they have cars. So I think that less housing or maybe no medical office building, something, some way to put parking into this. And I sympathize with the owners of the property, but they need to put parking into their building. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Shelley. Shelley, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, I'm Shelley Kahana. I live on Ordway Street. I agree with the concerns that have already been voiced regarding parking, the traffic congestion, most importantly, the very grave dangers posed to pedestrians and other drivers because of this very dangerous intersection, which will have a huge increase in traffic. I also want to agree with the statements about how this is a massive change to the environment on Solano Avenue, and this needs to be part of a much larger citywide discussion and vote. I believe that this probably needs an environmental impact study, as well as the traffic safety and engineering study that's already been mentioned. I think there are concerns about access to solar power for nearby structures because of the height of this building not coming, because it's so much greater than anything around it. It will cut off solar access for solar panels to some of the nearby buildings. I also agree that I do not believe Solano meets the criteria as a major transit corridor. Therefore, this project should not be eligible for the reduced parking requirement. Even if it were, this concession that they're asking for is massive. I think it should be declined. Lastly, I want to mention that I have significant concerns about how low income is defined, verified, and enforced for these alleged two low income units that are making it possible to request these unlimited waivers and 3 significant concessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Julie Graves. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Hello, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Julie Graves. I live on Ordway Street. I agree with I am in opposition to this project at the scale at which it is presented, and with the going to the mat to the extremes for the concessions. I mean, you can make a concession, but to go from 27 parking spaces to 2, one of which is for handicapped, is an example of the extreme. I want to mention a couple of things. I very much agree that there should be an environmental impact study. This is a big project, and I'm not sure that it falls under the small project rubric, which would allow it to escape an environmental impact study. And to add to the comments about the safety of the intersection, if there is going to be, it looks like 2 medical offices, one in the front and one in the back of this building. And if it's going to be an orthodontic office, that means there will be children. Anybody who's had a kid with their teeth getting straightened knows that these appointments are very fast. You know, they're 5 or 10 minutes once you are established with the practice. And parents are going to be dropping their kids off. They're going to be double parked because there is no parking. It's not like they can park half a block or a block away on the side streets, like on the street where people currently can find some parking. They're going to be dropping their kids off, and the kids are going to be running between cars or around cars or within the intersection to the sidewalk and then getting in. The parents will drive around in circles looking for a parking spot to be able to go in and meet their child when they're done. It's going to be really, really busy. And it's been pointed out, there is no crosswalk in front across Solano at that corner because it's a dangerous corner with the kind of wonky approaches of the streets there. Another thing I want to say is I've been up and down the street talking to small business owners.
Time's up. Next speaker, Dominic. Dominic, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, my name is Dominic Morales, and I am a business owner directly across from the proposed project. I own a plant shop, and I specifically chose the space I'm in for the light requirements it receives. The building I'm in is in a triangular shape and receives the most light through the entrance, and the project will block a majority of the sunlight I do need for my plants and my business to survive. Like mentioned before, many people drive to Solano Avenue for the small businesses and restaurants, including mine. This means we need parking, and a building that will have at least 12 residents will increase traffic and parking needs. 2 parking spots are not enough to suffice the already highly trafficked street. My customers will not be able to park in order to visit my shop, and this will negatively affect the success of my business and other businesses on Solano Avenue. So I ask that you please do not make it any harder for small businesses to survive on Solano. We are what makes Solano lively. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Noor, you have 2 minutes to speak starting now.
Hi, my name is Noor. I'm a Berkeley resident. I live about a little over a mile away, kind of between in North Berkeley, between BART and Solano. And I think that I understand that not everyone isn't going to be able to drive, but I think it is a fairly transit accessible place. It's 40 minutes away from San Francisco by BART and the 18 bus. The bus is relatively frequent for a bus line. It's not too hard to bike there from Berkeley or surrounding areas. And I think we need more housing. And if it's not going to work out to get more housing in any other way, then this is a great opportunity to have more housing in a place that is very accessible to restaurants, to shopping, to grocery store. It is accessible for young families to live without a car or with less driving than a lot of other places is in Albany. And I think that I understand the concerns about pedestrian safety, and there should be more work done to make sure it is a safe and accessible place for the current and future community that lives there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Michelle. Michelle, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lifshitz. I live on Solano Avenue, a bit down in Albany. A couple people mentioned the pedestrian issue. There are within a block of where I live in the last year, there's somebody killed at a four-way stop, run over by a car. Pedestrians. I've seen 2 accidents just outside of my place where I came out and had to give my statement as a witness. So if we have that many pedestrian accidents with a stop sign, with people zooming down Solano when they have a chance to actually move between the stops, because there isn't, traffic has gotten faster than 5 miles an hour. Can't imagine the impact it'll have down there. And this idea that Californians are just going to stop driving right now is, we need to stop pretending. Families with young kids are not going to, I know many single people who live around here who have more than one car. That is just unfathomable, actually. The traffic is just going to get worse. Traffic gets backed up enough, and then a lot of these accidents get caused with the double parking people are referring to. Their trucks going to Safeway and trucks delivering food, and it's already madness. And my biggest concern is the pedestrian danger. So with that, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jean Wu, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, my name is Jean Wu. I'm a longtime resident of Albany. I've lived in this home for over 30 years, and we really appreciate the quiet, and we appreciate the ability to park, which has become much more difficult of late. Adding 12 units and only 2 parking spaces for the commercial side and none for the residential makes no sense whatsoever. What we will see is not only traffic accidents, but we'll see increased air pollution, because people will start driving round and round and round the blocks. And many of the people in this neighborhood are older. They're not the kind of people who are going to ride bicycles everywhere, and they're not going to walk a mile and a half to get to park. I think we need to be realistic. There needs to be more parking, and if that means taking out the medical, that's reasonable. I think this building needs to be smaller. It is way too large and takes up way too much of the space on that corner. But the most dangerous thing to me is the health risks and the safety risks and the parking, and specifically air pollution, which will be constant. So I'm really definitely against this building.
Thank you. Next speaker, Robert Chasty, you have 2 minutes starting now.
Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll try not to go over many of the points other people raised. I have a problem. I am a direct neighbor to this project. And the project, if built as proposed, will prevent me from putting solar panels on my building. I'm in the process of trying to do that as we speak, and this will block the light. I'm surprised to see that the project proponents want to build out the entire site practically, and the elimination of all parking will be problematic for the neighbors and for the businesses. But for me personally, not being able to put solar on will be a loss, and it's something I'm committed to. So I have a kind of a question for the Planning and Zoning Commission to think about. If this becomes acceptable, this project, then every property owner, and I own a property next door. I also own a home in Albany and have lived here for, I don't know, since Abe Lincoln was in office. So the thing is that this would mean that every property owner along Solano could put how many square feet is this? 20,000 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot, something in that order, with no parking. Every property owner along Solano will be invited to do the same. And those kinds of movements beget more. So we should have a citywide discussion as to what we want as the future of Solano Avenue. Right now, it has a human scale to it. And with this kind of a project being approved, I believe this will be the largest building on Solano when it's built, or the most dense anyway. This will be an invitation to everybody. So
time's up. Next speaker, Bryce Nesbitt. You have 2 minutes to speak starting now.
Hello, this is Bryce Nesbitt. Am I heard this time?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I grew up on Marin Avenue at Ensenada. I know the area well. The proponents have proposed a high parapet wall around the top of the building, some feet high. I would ask the proponents and the owner to consider making this semi-transparent so that at least some light can filter down through onto Solano Avenue. This building is unfortunately on the south side of the street where all of the sun comes from. Second, DoorDash, especially with the idea that people here have reduced car usage. The modern way is to have increased deliveries. I think there's a need for the proponents to provide and the city to agree to a pickup and drop-off zone in this building for the various deliveries and drop-offs that will occur. Third, looking at the parking spots, there's only 2 of them, but nearly half the space is wasted. There's space for 4 cars, but it only holds 2. I would suggest pulling that parking forward and putting bike parking back. And my final comment relates to the bike parking. These stacked racks are quite inconvenient. By the time you get through a gate, 2 doors, a gate, pull the thing down and get your bike up. It's just too much for bike parking. Bike parking needs to be convenient and fast. And I think to make it ground level is the better way to go. 100% ground level, bike level parking is what's needed with space for trailers and such. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Ed Fields. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Good evening. I live adjacent to the San Pablo Avenue corridor. So welcome to our world, the world of the state density bonus, because every multifamily project now asks for a state density bonus. And they are just routinely approved, almost rubber stamped. The Solano Commercial District, this lot is currently zoned for 100% lot coverage. And despite the nice words in the staff report about the lower density residential neighbors, this property is actually surrounded by Solano commercial zoned properties on all 4 sides. So we are dealing with the same issues in the Solano Avenue corridor: height, massing, loss of light. I'm waiting for my solar panels to be blocked. And there's nothing in the law that you can do about solar panels. So I think this kind of development, large-scale, multifamily, mixed-use development is what we have to look forward to on both corridors. And I forgot to mention the 0 parking. I think there was a project approved on Evelyn. If I remember right, it was 14 units with 0 parking. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Next speaker, Belle Adler, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Is that okay? I don't want to go over what's been said. What I wanted to point out is that basically the developer is asking the neighbors to take the burden of these parking spaces, and they're picking up the slack for what the developer doesn't want to provide. And I think that's really grossly unfair. He wants to make a buck, I get it, but the whole neighborhood is going to be inconvenienced. I'd also like to say that this big density push is really a pressure on the hospital situation in the area. We have basically, if Alta Bates goes, where are people going to go to the hospital? There's way down in Oakland or maybe Marin, Vallejo, there's no accommodation for that. And I think we ought to think about it and think about also all the vacancies that are happening up and down San Pablo Avenue. You go up and down San Pablo, they're all vacant. So are we building something that's going to be vacant and not used well and be expensive perhaps? So I think that there's a lot of questions that need to be answered before we go ahead with a project this big. And might I also add, it looks pretty ugly on one of the sides without any windows. It looks like a cell block basically. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Last speaker, I believe, is Nick Peterson. You have 2 minutes starting now.
Hi, Nick Peterson. I'm a resident of Albany. I'm also a member of the Albany Climate Action Coalition and a member of Albany for Everybody. And I'd like to say in basic theory, I think there's some problems with this project. Basic theory, the idea of having the increased density and less car-oriented developments along our main commercial corridors is a good idea. I don't think we've come up with sort of the right process to alleviate a lot of concerns that I've heard tonight. But I'm optimistic that our future is going to be less car. I myself am 65 and have medical conditions that make, physical activity a little tough, but I ride my bike everywhere. I just got an electric bike. Those electric bikes are going to change a lot. They make things quite a bit easier. I would like to reinforce the comment made that the bike parking is not adequate. It should be much larger. It should be right at street level. It should accommodate cargo bikes, electric bikes, and have charging capability. I think also that the ingrained attitude about cars is incredibly hard to overcome. We've been very used to it for very long. If we are going to transition to cities that are more walkable and where bikes are more common, we need to do it in a perhaps a little bit more sensitive way than this project has. But again, there's a housing crisis. We need more housing. We need to find places for people who do want to live without a car that's close and convenient to main arterials and right next to bus lines and not far from BART. So
Time's up. We do actually have one more speaker, Kim Howard. You have 2 minutes to speak starting now.
Hi, I'm Kim Howard. I live about 5 doors down from the proposed project. So while I'm in favor of multiple story housing, I oppose the massive size of the building and the extreme parking concessions for all the reasons and the possible negative impacts that I've already voiced. So just wanted to double click on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I am not seeing any other speakers at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Chris. With that, then we will go ahead and close public comment this evening and turn it back to the commission for discussion. Would any of the commissioners like to start things off for us? Great, Doug, go ahead, Doug.
Better unmute first. Okay. Yeah, let's see. Well, we had a lot of speakers tonight, and I do have some thoughts put together. I guess I'll just go through it. I think the staff report had some questions in it that we were supposed to address. I think there were 3 or 4 of them. The questions to Staff Act. And I guess I organized my comments along that. So the first question on page 2 of the staff report had to do with concessions. And my first question, I guess, is what is the rationale for eliminating the required setbacks on Ordway and on Solano? Again, the entire application, we don't have any information from the developer giving us rationale as to why they want to ask for these concessions and how do they justify these concessions and why is it justified to do that, and that applies for that one. I think that significant additional information would be needed to support the parking concession, and in particular I'm really interested in credible information and current information that would somehow demonstrate the level of car ownership by residents in mixed-use buildings in our area. What is it? Only then can this commission have an idea of what the actual parking demand might be. I'm sure that it's higher than 0 for the residential units, but we don't have any information and haven't on other projects we've had over the past 6 months about what kind of parking demand multifamily development has. And I think it'd be the obligation of this developer to provide us with some of that information. Let's see. They're asking for waivers and to justify a 50% density bonus. I'm wondering why, and maybe I have missed something here on how the density bonus law works, but I'm wondering why the waiver of the floor area ratio requirement shouldn't be limited to 50%. In that case, the FAR would be 1.875, not 3.795, whatever it was, I think. They're asking for a 300% increase in the FAR here. And I think that's huge. And how is it that a developer can come in here and ask for a waiver of our regulations that is that large? And I really think it needs to be justified and described specifically in a future staff report as to how that works and why and why they can do this. The open space provided is very small. We have an open space requirements that's reasonable. They're providing about 1/3 of what we require. And again, how is this justified? So I just keep thinking we need more. Let's see, design and circulation is a question in the staff report asking us to comment on that. Several commenters have noted the complexity of this intersection. And what I want to ask is how is this intersection treated in the Solano Avenue Complete Streets Plan? I looked for my copy today and I didn't find it at my fingertips. But I think we did have some changes in the Complete Streets program that would have addressed this plan, this intersection. And I want to make sure that in the future, in the upcoming staff report, that we talk about what those changes would be and decide how this project would implement those or would conform, or if not conform, how would not conform to what we've done with the Complete Streets Plan. And then additional information. We need a lot of additional information here, but what I really would like to see is help from staff in telling us how we can manage or reduce or negotiate the magnitude of the request of the concessions and waivers that are here. What this applicant is doing is saying, you have a parking standard, we want it conceded, 100%. You have a setback standard, we want it eliminated, 100%. And do we have any ability to say, no, you can only get a 50% reduction or a 10% reduction or whatever it might be. So that's a real concern for me. Let's see. And then a general comment, state planning law requires that we have specific and objective development standards in our general plan. They're very important. We've been hearing that language a lot in working on a specific plan and on the housing element. And this project, it looks to me, is using the state density law, bonus law to override virtually all of our specific objective development standards. And it just, therefore, it makes a mockery of our general plan as it describes Solano Avenue and the zoning regulations we have for Solano Avenue. And in exchange for that, we get 2 affordable units of housing and 10 market rate units of housing. The affordable units we definitely need, and that is really important, but it's only 2 and not a lot. And then the developer gets to build 10 more market rate housing. Now there is a shortage of market rate housing, but if the density bonus law continues the way it's being implemented, we'll have lots and lots of market rate housing in the future, maybe enough to exceed our arena requirements, and not enough affordable housing. So we're not getting much in this project, I don't think, in the way to solve our housing crisis and the housing shortage that we're seeing here. So as you can see, I don't really like the project as it's designed, and it doesn't have my vote at this point, that's for sure. My biggest concern, like many of the other speakers we've heard tonight, which is new to me, I haven't heard of another project so much, is the parking. I do not believe that multifamily developments will ever generate, never generate a parking demand. Zero car households are a small minority of overall households, and I think they'll be increasing, but they are going to remain very low. It's a myth that transit-oriented development needs no parking. In March 2020, when this project, the earlier version of this project, when we had the first study session on this site or this project, I think I was open to the idea that the project could work with a half a parking space per unit. I've actually changed my position on that as I've been seeing more and more zero parking multifamily developments coming to us. And as I've been looking around at what multifamily development we have, I really believe from studies I've seen and from my own observations that most multifamily developments need 1.2 to 1.4 spaces per unit. Our standard is 1 space per unit, and I think it should be enforced in every way, any way we possibly can. So I think this project should be built with 12 spaces for 12 residential units. And probably the only way to make that happen would be to eliminate the commercial space. And that would be an option. Then we'd have a residential building on San Pablo Avenue, not a mixed use building, but it would at least be a residential building that did have some parking provided for the tenants. And I would do that. It's hard for me, since I'm concerned about the overall concept of the project. It's hard for me to look at the design details at this point. I don't have many comments on those. I suppose a couple. I actually did like the scalloped configuration at the front corner, and I think it's important to emphasize that corner of Solano and Ordway, and I really liked the way that was done. But I'm not at all fond of the teeny little balconies on the Ordway side. I understand that the architect's concerns about junky balconies, I suppose, but I really think that we should stick by our open space standards as much as we can. Those balconies are really tiny, and we need more usable open space for residents of that building, and those balconies should be larger. Height is an issue for quite a few people, I think. I'm not as concerned about that, about the height of this building. I think that a 47, 49 foot height, even on Solano, could potentially work. But this is only a 5,000 square foot lot built up, absolutely maxed out. And we have to look at some kind of balance there. It's too bad about the trees that'll be lost. I think there's one nice oak at least that would be lost in there. I think in 2013 we worked hard to come up with a plan that would protect that oak. But it, you know, with given the size of the lot, that tree may have to go. I'm not sure. Okay, finally, my last comment on CEQA. I'm pretty sure that the infill exemption is appropriate for this project, that it would work. I don't think we'll need to have an EIR. I don't think it'd be justified in doing that. But I think planning commissioners need to look really closely at that infill exemption because it requires a finding that I don't think can be made. And I don't know that the density bonus law says that we don't have to make that finding. And that finding is one that we have to find that the project is consistent with the applicable general plan designation and applicable zoning designations and regulations. And if that comes back to us and with that finding there, I think we need a good analysis of why we can't make that finding and talking about the density bonus law and how the project violates our general plan, violates our zoning ordinances, but still must be approved or is still exempt from a CEQA document. That would have to happen to me when it comes back, and I really think the CEQA process is challenged by that. So. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Momin.
Thank you, Chair Vody. Thank you, the designer team and the owners for the presentation. And I'm really, kind of overwhelmed by a lot of response to this project. In opposition as well as in support of the project from the residents of the city. In general, I support this project on Solano Avenue. I think it is a suitable infill mixed-use project of a scale which is appropriate to the street of this size and type. In addition to activating the retail corridor, it will create valuable housing stock in the city, including to affordable units. Since the project is using state density bonus, SB 330 law and the Housing Accountability Act, it looks like there is not much we can do about some of the waivers and concessions. I would really look forward to the city's response, the planning staff's response to Commissioner Donaldson comments about city's control over the intensity or extent of the waivers and concessions. Personally, I am kind of not very comfortable about some of those concessions. So there is no limit to the concessions, and are we supposed to agree to whatever the developers ask for, or there are any code provisions where we can have some restrictions on that. Recently, I observed that San Francisco doesn't allow density bonus waivers and concessions to some of their codes. And one particular about that is the percentage of dwelling unit sizes. They require at least 20% of the dwelling units to be 2-bedroom units. So this is just for an example. So I wonder if our planning code has any such provision, and if not, would we contemplate doing something like that in future? Having said that, I would totally support zero setback on Solano Avenue and Ordway Street. one additional floor and FAR bonus since it is a corner lot on a retail street. It allows for a compact, dense building. I'm okay with reduced parking considering the location in a walkable and well-served area. But since the majority of the units are two-bedroom units, there will surely be some families with kids living in the building and they would need some parking. So I would have liked some parking provision for the residents instead of zero parking. This is not exactly like the project we approved near BART station, which was 14 units, zero parking. It was like really in close proximity with the BART station. This site is like 1.5 miles away from any of the BART stations. And so having zero parking may not practically work. I echo one of the public comments about size of affordable units that are being offered as inclusionary units. Is there any code provision which specifies what size that could be? Can the developers offer just this like smallest units as part of the affordable housing component and have larger units as part of their marketed component? Does city have any control over that, or can planning commission recommend anything? I also had comments about density bonus application on a non-residential component. Thanks, Chair Wadi, for raising that in your initial questions. The by right project shows 800 square feet of medical office, but the density bonus proposal shows 3,200 or something, and that's like 4 times increase. While the housing units are increased from 8 to 12, which is 50% bonus, which follows the density bonus regulation. So I would like to know how the density bonus is applied on non-residential components. And if that helps reducing the building height, I would support that. Similarly, the FAR, I hear Commissioner Donaldson's observation about the FAR being increased 4 times from 3 times, 1.25 to 3.79. And I was comparing that with one project we recently approved, 540 San Pablo on Albany Bowl site. And that site has 2.25 FAR. And with density bonus, it was raised to 2.96. At the same time, the number of units were increased in the same amount, like 50%. I understand this site is like really small, and it's a small lot with 100% lot coverage. So there would be possibility of having a higher FAR. But if we compare these two projects, the kind of increase in FAR is kind of it doesn't sound right. But I have seen some projects which are specifically based on the density of the zoning that zoning offers, and so it just goes by the number, and depending on the market conditions and the unit mix, the FAR increases sometimes in the same range as 50%, or sometimes even lower, or sometimes slightly higher. But in this case, the FAR is like 3 times, which should, I think, explore further. And then I understand, like coming to the design issues, I understand this is a schematic design, and a lot more design improvements would be done in the subsequent submittals. I have a few comments and observations. I think building entries are not really worked out well. If it is on the Ordway Street, if the Ordway Street entry is supposed to be the main entry, it is not really well defined. It doesn't have an appearance of a main entrance. And if it is from the Solano Avenue, then I'm not really comfortable with building lobby being shared with the medical offices and their visitors, and like deep long corridor to reach the elevator. The architecture of building is promising, but not very well developed yet. I understand the architects are working on that. West elevation looks kind of underdeveloped as compared to the north elevation. Base could be defined a little more in better way. It looks like the entry and the roof deck kind of are in similar language. They try to speak to each other, but they have not been fully coordinated. And then I understand that east elevation abuts the lot boundary and cannot have windows, but I would recommend architects to look at possibilities of creating niches and then having windows in those niches. I have seen projects where like 5 feet by 3 feet niches could allow smaller windows on the shorter side of those niches, and that creates some that brings some light in the units on that side, and also creates some um, you know, create some features on the dead wall, and particularly on the upper levels, the portion which would be visible above the adjacent property on the east side. And if the windows are not really practical, I would recommend designers to explore some hard installation possibilities. I have seen some projects where buildings have installed some nice public art on the dead facades, and that brings some interest on those sides. And then I would really prefer some openness in the southeast corner. That particular unit in the southeast corner is like not really very comfortable, where a living room is deriving light from like just a 5 feet of setback, and then other bedroom is deriving light from a small interior well. I would like to see some modification in that corner where the units could be rearranged. Maybe larger unit could come in the front and smaller unit could go back, and so that both the units could have better light and exposure. And then I would really recommend more bike parking, and also bike parking of different types, since there will be people using larger bikes, tandem bikes, and other bikes with other paraphernalia. Having just those stackers would not be really useful. They would cater to just the conventional bike sizes. And then finally, since the parking is reduced so substantially, I would recommend developers to explore transit subsidy to the residents in form of monthly pass to the residents. So that would cater to some of the concerns about car use and shortage of parking around the project. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner McLeod.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for their comments, and staff and the consultant and the project applicant for their presentations. So yeah, where to start? I guess big picture, we are in a housing crisis. We are in a climate crisis. You know, in a lot of ways that drives this kind of development. State density bonus was designed to help us meet our housing needs by overcoming objections such as we've heard, and making things, you know, easier for developers to build these projects. So in a way, this is state density bonus law doing what it's supposed to do. I think with our current standards, and I think the architect and the owner stated it pretty directly, that under our current by right standards, the project doesn't work. It doesn't allow enough units to be built to justify the higher construction costs or the parking costs. And that's exactly what we've seen on San Pablo Avenue, is that our current standards basically lead us with no development there and no housing. So our standards are too low. A lot of people have mentioned that we should be having a citywide discussion about, you know, our zoning laws, what kind of buildings we want, what kind of housing we want. And in fact, we are having that discussion And we will have it directly on the agenda after this item, and that's our housing element discussion, in which we'll be talking about higher densities, providing more housing in Albany, raising our zoning standards on not just San Pablo Avenue but also on Solano Avenue and perhaps other streets. I would recommend everyone to stay on and listen to our housing element discussion after this to get a bigger perspective on what we're going through in Albany and in the state of California in general to provide housing, because that's a big part of what we're trying to do is increase housing. It allows people to live where, shops are, where we have transit, where we have great schools. It allows more people to live here. It provides more customers, local customers for our local businesses. So, when we talk about Solano as a shopping destination, well, having people live there, it solves that problem in a way. And these are your customers, the people that are going to be living there. So, there's a lot to kind of unpack here, but this is pretty much state density bonus law working as it is intended to do. And for the most part, we are not allowed to change or reduce the concessions and the waivers that the applicant is asking for. I think they can demonstrate pretty, specifically that the project could not be built if the FAR is not raised up to whatever it is at the moment. So, these things are all happening because we do want more housing in Albany. More housing in Albany is a good thing. It's great to bring more people here. I think it benefits our commercial districts to have more housing, benefits our local businesses. That's kind of big picture. I agree with some of the comments that staff and the applicant could do a much better job at providing a pro forma that does justify the waivers and concessions, and I think they can do that. So, other things that have been brought up, and I definitely appreciate Mr. Martin's comment about having housing spread around the city. It is an equity issue. We don't want to concentrate it on one street. I do support upzoning on Solano Avenue and on the entire corridor there. So let's see. To some of the more project-specific comments, I agree with most of Commissioner Moment's comments. I think specifically some of the corridors are too long. I think the entryways are not well defined. They're not very convincing as an entry to what should be a very nice residence. I think the bike parking is insufficient. I think if we're reducing car use, if we're not having car parking, we should be providing alternatives, and that should be much more robust bike parking with room for cargo bikes. I read a study recently that electric bikes can revolutionize our urban transportation system. And that's what we should be planning for. We're not planning for the car-centric past. We're planning for a future that is much less car dependent. Cities all over the world are doing it. It's kind of an environmental imperative. It also makes for a more livable, healthier city, less congested city if we convert to a more bicycle and pedestrian-based transportation system, with bus and transit. So, yeah, I think there needs to be much better bike parking, has to be secure, so not just anyone can walk in off the street and grab those bikes. I think, some of those lifting bike racks are fine, but I think there should be also a pretty big area with just floor level bike storage. Let's see, a few other things. Looking at some of the units, they're kind of long and deep, a lot of the rooms, and I don't think there's enough daylight. I think there should be more windows in a lot of them. I think there just needs to be more windows, especially on the Ordway facade. I think it would benefit from more windows. I agree the balconies are too small. I think I think it could provide open space and more usable space and be a little bit bigger. I'm not convinced about the corner, sort of defining it by the void, the zigzag in plan. I think it could be a little more prominent. I think it could be done better. I think the architect would do well to, study that a little more, provide some more examples or come up with some more options for that. In the interior, I think there's going to be some way to figure out how to separate the elevator from the commercial and the residential use. Don't know how you do that. I don't really like the long corridors on the ground floor plan for the second office, especially. Doesn't seem like a very pleasant entry sequence. Other things, I like the rooftop open space. It could be a little bigger. On San Pablo Avenue, we are talking about reducing our open space requirement from our current standard to somewhere about 80 to 100 square feet per resident. So, you're not far away from that. I think you could bump up your open space a bit. I'm kind of running out of steam here, but my last comment would be that I agree with one of the callers that suggested the unit mix for the affordable units has to reflect the mix overall. So I think there should be one bedroom affordable unit and one 2-bedroom unit as an affordable unit. And I would also, I would appreciate greatly if the affordable unit was the 2 units were very low affordable in exchange for all the concessions and waivers that you are getting. And, I look forward to seeing how this project evolves. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pilch.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions. Oh, yeah, by the way, just keying off of one thing Commissioner McLeod said, there are standards for, and this is for the public as well, there are standards for income and the income brackets, and there's low and very low and extremely low. So I think what the applicant is proposing right now is very low, and what I hear Commissioner McLeod saying is that we could go for is low, and we could go for very low or extremely low as well. So I have a couple of questions for staff. Number one, isn't it true that the street at this point is all in Berkeley? So all of Solano?
At this point, the street and sidewalk is Albany jurisdiction. The private property on the north side of Solano is within Berkeley. So the city limit line is basically the property line.
Oh, okay. I was looking at a map, and I guess this map provider has it wrong. They have Berkeley as owning the street. Okay, thank you for that. The other next question is, I believe in your materials, you said that state law says the burden is on the city to prove that the concessions and waivers being asked are not due to cost. But is that correct?
Yes, there's been a recent Court of Appeals ruling in Los Angeles just about a month ago where the courts ruled that we would have to demonstrate that it's not necessary rather than to require the developer to demonstrate that it is necessary. Okay,
so we're not likely to get to be able to require that. We won't be able to require that of the applicant. Okay, that's good to know. And then can they provide windows on the east side, seeing as the building is built on the lot line?
The architect was correct. Under the California Building Code, whatever is essentially within 3 feet of the property line must be fireproof. So it could be fireproof windows, non-operable windows. That tends to be very expensive and not very practical in a lot of cases. So in most cases for buildings like this that are built on the property line, it's a solid wall. Perhaps there's some architectural treatments or some different things that can be done to kind of soften that a little bit. But that's a hard and fast building code requirement.
Okay. Well, there is at least a well, I believe, on that side. And I would urge the applicants at least to put windows on the well where they'll be more than 3 feet away from the property line, because I'm hearing this from other commissioners too. I think light is a problem, especially since you can't get any windows on that east side, or not practically. And so then I would also key off of that and say that I would encourage you to do more windows on the south side as well. And if you have privacy concerns, perhaps these could be clear story windows. But I think in general, lighting for the residents needs to be considered a bit more. And I know it's early for the design, so this is just some input into your further design. Well, I think Commissioner, well, let me see. I want to speak to a few things that I heard. What do we get out of this project? But we get 12 units. So we're in a housing crisis, and we need all the units we can get. And I think Commissioner McLeod was saying that as well, and was also saying that because of our restrictive zoning, this is also what we get. We get people coming in with a density bonus, taking advantage of state law. And state law was written for because cities were not producing the housing. And I think, we brought this on ourselves a bit. Not us, but the city at one point, 15 years ago, some folks decided, okay, we're going to actually reduce our zoning. We're going to reduce our height limits and really restrict our zoning. And now we have this restrictive zoning, and people can more easily take advantage of state density bonus law, which puts us at a disadvantage because then we have much less say in the development. So we should increase our zoning to how we want it so that we'll have more control, and developers won't have to come in and take care of the density and take advantage of the density bonus. I just want to speak to eliminating the commercial. I'm not a real fan of that because I think mixed use on Solano is exactly where you want mixed use. You want all mixed use on Solano. It's a perfectly wonderful, walkable commercial street that's perfect for mixed use. If nowhere else we want it on Solano. So I'm a little bit concerned of about any solution that might eliminate the commercial. I like the balconies. I think they're a neat touch, and I like the way the building looks on the outside so far. So I would keep those. The entrances, I have a little bit of different understanding of how they worked based on the design. So I think what the next time you come back to us, the applicant should probably walk us through how that all works, like how the second medical facility is accessed, whether or not disabled folks have to use the entrance on Ordway. It looks like they do, rather than the entrance on Solano. It looks like there's a commercial entrance, commercial entrance on Solano, and also kind of like a back alley entrance for the residential on Solano. But there seems to be a lot of uncertainty about that. So come back and walk us through that next time, so we know what all is going on with that. And some of the details we're going to have to get back to. It sounds like there's definitely some legwork the staff and the consultant's going to have to do about exactly whether or not how much control we have and if the calculations were done right. So I won't speak much to the massing of the building and potentially eliminating a floor until then. But I don't think it's massively out of scale. We are going to get more dense development like this everywhere in town, and this definitely is striking in where it's placed. But then again, I went there today, and I saw that there's a two-story apartment building across the street on Ordway. There's a two-story building across the street on Solano. So it's not, and there's another two-story across the street on a couple of two-story buildings across the street on Solano. So it's not like this is all, and on Ordway, there's quite a number of large houses. Quite a few houses there have been renovated to have a large second story. So I don't think it's way out of scale. The parking situation, without speaking of the amount of parking, I think the parking situation and the bike parking situation could be better. One of the people who spoke had a great comment, which is that where the parking spaces are now, you'll have this big empty space inside the garage area, if you will. Whereas if perhaps there's some way to bring the parking spaces right out to the door area, then you'd have all that area behind for bicycle parking or other amenities. I don't know how to do that other than maybe then to have a couple of doors instead of the one door. But consider that there'll be all this kind of wasted space in the parking area. And I do agree that we need to do a lot better with the bicycle parking. And I think, as Commissioner McLeod said, if you want to convince people that you only need a couple parking spaces, you got to show them that you're serious about providing excellent bike parking. And so what I see now is the bike parking is in an entryway, so that someone who has to take their bike is going to block anyone who wants to enter. And so it seems really problematic. And the stackers are great for saving space, but they're not great for usage. I mean, some people are not going to be able to get their bike up there. Some of these things take a physical effort that some people don't have, and we want to encourage people to use bikes, including e-bikes, which can provide more mobility for a lot more people, but they can also be heavier. So we need to accommodate those and charging for the bikes. I think the parking spaces all need to have electric vehicle charging. No doubt on that, especially if there's only two. I support a better street, absolutely. Part of that, I think, has to be on Berkeley, because they have that, what I call a slip street. I guess it's Tacoma, where you can just run down Tacoma right into Solano. That needs to be turned into a T intersection, and then you can create a beautiful little pocket park there if you do that. But that's on Berkeley land over there. In any case, Berkeley and Albany definitely need to improve the street, and both cities have committed to doing that at some point in the future. If we're concerned about parking spillover, parking permits and residential parking permits and parking meters are the way to go. And I urge people who have spoken today to speak out to Albany about residential parking permits, and then your problem about parking on your street goes away, and you get to use that space if you pay for that parking permit. Let's see, one more. Someone talked about a parapet wall up on the very top. Yeah, if that's the case, then maybe that should be translucent, or at least perhaps that would reduce the effect of the height of the building. So that's not a bad comment, if I understood that correctly. And I also agree with Commissioner McLeod that this a development like this is only going to be good for business. There's your customers right there coming, who are going to be able to walk out their door and go to Solano Cellars, go to Barney's, go to all the restaurants, and go mail their package at UPS store, etc. Go to the whatever that place is called, something Greens. So I think those are my comments for now. Just checking if I have anything else. This is a preliminary. We're at the preliminary meeting for the preliminary application, so I'm certain that the applicants will take our comments and come back with improvements for us next time. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Pilch. I'll go ahead and just wrap up with a couple of my comments on this project. Just first and foremost, I think it's important to sort of set the context here that between the Housing Accountability Act and state density bonus law coupled together really precludes our ability to effectively deny housing projects. So the density, some general massing, and some, other concessions that we may not otherwise be keen on, our hands are very much tied by the state, and the state has really beefed up their compliance division effectively at HCD, and they are on it. In my day job, they are following up on these kinds of things when cities disapprove projects left and right. And so there are some baseline constraints that I think everyone should just be kind of with that shared understanding that it is going to be difficult to outright disapprove projects. However, there's absolutely room, I think, to sort of noodle around the edges a bit and make this a better project. And that's, I think, the hope that I have coming out of this hearing. So that's where my comments are primarily going to be focused of how we can progress this project and make some meaningful improvement. So first and foremost, on the issue of the concessions, I think it's worthwhile for staff to just double check on the setback concession. I would consider that to be more of a waiver. Typically, my understanding is that waivers are used when the building envelope that's allowed under sort of standard zoning is constraining the ability to get the density bonus. So usually things like setbacks and height are things that are accommodated through waivers. And I believe there are an unlimited number of waivers that can be sought in order to accommodate the density bonus. Whereas concessions are usually effectively a give to developers of, we'll make it pencil more easily because you're providing a density bonus. So they tend to be things that reduce the overall cost of building. Parking is the quintessential concession that is used statewide. Parking on the lowest end for above grade parking runs at about $30,000 a spot. So it's pretty basic back of the envelope math here. And when it's below grade, it can go up, well above $80,000 a space. So it's very easy for a developer to demonstrate that removing parking reduces costs. So, I don't have any concerns about the developer requesting a parking concession. I don't feel like anything else needs to be provided to demonstrate that that is a direct cost savings for the developer. But I also think that's really important for the public to understand. This isn't something where we're making a discretionary judgment call on whether it's appropriate to remove the parking or not. This is a pretty black and white state mandated provision. Parking is costs to build, and they can request to reduce their costs by eliminating that code standard. So that's my thought on that. And I would just reaffirm what Jeff reiterated, that recent court case really does also preclude the city's ability to mandate the applicant to sort of jump through effectively hoops of demonstrating through pro formas or other mechanisms that something is a cost savings, or how much does making this change save them money. They've really flipped the burden onto the city to demonstrate on the flip side. Second primary issue here is really, to me, around the medical space. Again, state density bonus, Housing Accountability Act, those are the key state laws that really limit the city's hands. And those are all about housing production. That has nothing to do with building medical space because you want to build medical space into your project. Certainly a mixed use building is permissible, to have as part of state density bonus. But I do think it's worthwhile for staff to look into how much flexibility we have on that front. I would also argue a couple things, regardless of exactly how it's laid out on here. Medical use sounds like requires a conditional use in Solano. Based on other hearings that we've had, I've said this before, I'm not a huge fan of medical uses on the ground floor. I think they're fairly actually inactive ground floor uses. I prefer those types of uses to be on second floors. I think they're a great second floor commercial use, but not a great ground floor use. I think more traditional retail or food and beverage service is a much better ground floor use. Coincidentally, it also, I believe in our parking standards, has a lower parking obligation, which kind of kills two birds with one stone there in terms of lowering the necessary obligation that they're seeking a waiver from. And thirdly, most retail isn't successful to have that big of a footprint, especially on Solano. Most of the retail that we see is a much smaller footprint. And so I think it's worth exploring for the applicant, looking at shrinking the footprint of that medical, and maybe as a result that can drop a floor at the back half of the building. So, maybe it ends up being that, 4+ story on the Solano corner, but back adjacent to the residential buildings, you drop down a floor because the commercial is only taking up a half of a floor plate, and you can drop some residential units down onto that. Or alternatively, get rid of the commercial altogether, saves you the construction costs of that space. And it brings down the height without reducing the residential occupancy. And obviously, again, if you eliminate the medical, you eliminate the need for all those parking spaces that they're asking for waivers. I would also question whether parking waivers, the concession that's being sought for the parking on the commercial is actually an eligible concession. Parking for residential, yes, no question in my mind. But if the commercial is commercial, it's not residential, it's not about the density bonus. And so the parking that's associated with that, I would question how that kind of fits into a density bonus application. And that's just something I'm not as familiar with. So I think those are some things to look into in my mind. And again, I would also be much more supportive of just regular retail at the ground floor. And I agree, I think a mixed use building is still more ideal, but I also think when we're put in a position where, it's a bigger building, it's out of context, there are a lot of neighborhood concerns. If the balance is having it be an entirely residential building and we still get the housing that we need and the inclusionary housing that we need, and it can sort of mitigate some of the neighborhood concerns by not having any commercial in it, by dropping it a floor and reducing the parking need. Maybe that's sort of the compromise that we can land on and live with for this project. So I'll just sort of put that out there. Lastly, design comments. Generally speaking, I think this is a very competent architect, and I don't have a ton of concerns about the direction that this will evolve in. Obviously, what we're looking at tonight is very schematic in nature. With that, I think it could use a little bit more articulation on the two facades. I think right now it's still a fairly flat facade. And I know this architect's work in the past, you've done a lot of projects that have had some really neat changes in plane, changes in material, things that really break up both facades. So I'd encourage the architect to sort of explore that a bit more. Consider maybe even with the roof deck, the placement of it. It seems really stacked towards the Ordway Street, where you can see a lot of both the stair penthouse, the trellis, and that sort of thing. And I think the closer we can stack all of that towards Solano, the better. Again, I know you're probably dealing with some core issues that are hard to necessarily stack towards the front, but I think it's just, again, worthwhile to explore. I personally don't have any issues with the parapet. To me, it looks like it's the minimum required by code. It's a little shy of 4 feet, it looks like. So I think 42 inches is the minimum required by building code for a parapet, and it looks like it's sitting right around there right now. So overall, I don't have a huge issue with that. But again, I think sort of finishing up that sort of cap of the building, however it's going to be finished, is a design detail that I'm sure this architect will work forward, moving forward. And I think that wraps all of my questions. I know it's very late here this evening, but I think those are my initial comments that I look forward to having resolved in the next hearing. And Commissioner Pilch, did you have some final comments?
Yeah, just really briefly. I thought that your comments were great, and I just wanted to second the idea that ground floor medical use is a less desirable use, not as an active use, and that's a great comment. I just wanted everyone in the applicant to hear that a retail use would be better. Thank you.
All right. Oh, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would prefer to see some more active retail or other type food service in the front part on Solano, something like that. The back section could still be a medical office, which at that point it is basically second floor and not so important to create life on the street and all that. So I do appreciate those comments. If that back office was eliminated, then that whole block could be dropped one floor, which would provide a little bit of a transition to the neighborhood. But again, it's maybe how this project pencils out and how much rent is, important, or how that will pencil out to make the project viable. So that's all. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, if that wraps Commission's comments, I think we can go ahead and close this item. I will note, since it is well past 9:30, as our agenda indicates, we do not start new agenda items after 9:30. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and continue the remaining items on our agenda out to our next Planning and Zoning Commission hearing which one other change from the agenda, the next meeting will be on February 23rd. The February 9th hearing is canceled. So with that, items 7-3 and 8-1 will be continued out to the February 23rd hearing, which will be our next regularly scheduled agenda, just given the hour of the evening. So with that, we will go ahead and close this evening's hearing. So thank you everyone for sticking around so late and providing great commentary and to all the members of the public as well.
All right, thank you.
Just checking with staff that the not hearing comments about the housing element, that in that timeline, that's going to be okay. I suppose if it's not, you can always do a special meeting if necessary, but the timeline going to be okay?
Yeah, I think we can make that work. We will, I was able to check with our consultant, Barry Miller. He is available on the 23rd. And we will just have to hustle a little bit right after that to be able to bring something back to you in the later part of the spring. But I think it'd be better to do that than to try to start the discussion at this hour, I think.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner Donaldson?
I could put my comments on the housing element in writing. I have them pretty much all written up anyway. I wrote them up the morning after the last meeting. If that can work, and then you could circulate them, I could get them to Jeff or Chris, and we could circulate them to the commission. But that Commissioner Moblin hasn't commented either on the housing element. So that may be.
We have to be careful about that because that's and it can be interpreted as a violation of the Brown Act if you're exchanging ideas outside the context of a meeting. So unfortunately, we're leaning towards the favoring having, those written comments would be great, and we can incorporate those into a staff report and be prepared for it. But you really need, and there's a lot of value when the five of you interact to talk about it. So
Right, we'll do it next month and in public. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Moblin, did you have a?
I had the same comment because I was absent in the last meeting, so I had prepared my comments in writing, and I was going to email that, and then I got to know that there would be a continuation.
Yes. Great. Okay. So both of those items, again, we'll save that conversation for February 23rd. And with that, our agenda is adjourned for the evening. So thanks again for the late night.